this meeting to order and welcome everyone that's here, especially those that are joining us by the city's channel, TV channel, or streaming. We are calling this meeting to order, and the first item on our agenda is to have introductions, and we'll start with our city attorney.
Good evening, Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Good evening, Victoria Watlington, your City Council member representing District 3.
Charles Picard, District 6.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Good evening, Luana Mayfield, Council at Large.
Renee Johnson, District 4.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Billy Tons, Deputy City Clerk.
All right, now, I would like to ask the staff if there were questions from the council, if those questions have been distributed.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. And at your seats, you have the questions that have been asked so far. And Ms. Mayfield, I didn't know if you got a chance to look over yours yet, or you had any additional ones, or Mayor Pro Tem or anyone else have any additional questions?
All right, we're going to take questions from any of the items that are on consent. And Ms. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I'd like to pull item number 17 for a separate vote.
All right.
And I believe you had comment on one as well, right?
Okay,
For
we will
19.
have a separate vote, and then anyone can make a comment on it as when we bring it up on the agenda. Okay? Ms. Mayfield?
I have a couple I would like to pull for a separate vote, number
Okay.
16, 15, number 12, 10, and 11.
All right. Okay, so with that, is there any further people that would have something that they would like to have a separate vote on? So is there any item that anyone would like to comment on before we move into a motion? All right. Ms. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I just had a comment on one of them. Trying to pull it up. I forgot the number. What number did I have that on, Ms. Harris?
19, I believe. Yes, sir, 19, the property tax consent.
Yeah, I was just going over it, and I saw a name of a community member that was lost recently, Ms. Deborah Triplett. She was a beloved member of all around Charlotte, but particularly in the arts community and the Plaza Midwood community. So just wanted to take that moment of personal privilege to recognize her life and the folks that she has impacted.
All right, thank you very much. She was truly one of the people that contributed to the beauty of our city, both by art and gardening. So with that, yes, Ms. Johnson.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask about item number 25. We could pull
Yes,
that
ma'am.
as well.
Okay, you want a separate vote for it?
Yes,
A
please.
separate
Thank
vote
you.
for item 25. Okay, any other comments or questions? So we will have, may I have a motion for consent items 10 through 24 with 25 with the following exceptions. 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17, and 25.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hands. That is, anyone opposed? All right, so now we'll go to Ms. Mayfield, who believe, let's start with item 10, and then we'll go to in numerical order. Ms. Mayfield, item 10, which is the Governor's Highway Safety Program Grant for Traffic Safety Driving While Impaired Task Force.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question for this was clarification. So specifically, I asked, what would the new CMPD budget become for the creation of this task force? And more importantly, I wanted to find out, is this a task force that we currently have in place, or is this the creation of a new task force?
Yes, ma'am, if I may answer that. So, yes, this is an existing task force that we've been getting this grant to help fund the portion of it for the past, I believe this one's the one that we've been getting for the past 10 years. Yes, ma'am. So it's not a new one, and it fits in, this one dovetails with our Vision Zero program, and the goal is to reduce fatalities, crash fatalities specifically.
So it would be helpful if we were to actually get an update on how this task force is working. My concern is that this grant is only for $187,566, yet we have this allocated potentially for a budget of $1 million, almost $1 million, because it's $750,265 is budgeted for this. Are there additional grants that go along with this? I'm just wondering if there are other items, since we have a need with the hiring and recruitment of officers, if this really is still the best need to have this particular task force, and if council receives a regular update on the status of the work that this task force is doing.
Okay, thank you. So we provide for you an update on that task force, the work of this task force.
And I'm not in support of moving forward with this tonight without having that additional information, Mayor.
Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments on item 10? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of item 10 or disapproval?
I motion for us to defer.
A motion for defer, is there a second? Second. There's a second. All in favor of the deferral of the allocation of the Highway Safety Program Grant for Traffic Safety Driving While Impaired Task Force, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Deferring it.
No, it's
it.
deferring till information is provided here.
All right, so we have 3, the motion fails. All in favor of do I have another motion to approve this? We have a motion to approve, is there a second? We have a second. All in favor of approval of item number 10, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, thank you. That passes.
I
Ms.
said pass with
Mayfield?
5 if 6 is our number.
Oh, we have
Neither-
5.
neither motion passed.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.
There's no
5.
action.
Raise your hands again if you were in favor of the motion. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we lost one person. Okay. Motion.
Member just joined, can we get the recount?
Well, she has to get caught up to
Ms.
talk about it.
Ms. Mayfield, let me try, please. We'll come back to the item because it did not pass one way or the other. We'll come back to it.
So,
All right?
Miss,
All right,
I'm sorry,
item
we
number-
have 2 extra people
I
just
know,
joined. Miss-
I see that. I'm not blind, y'all. I'm not blind today. I got my glasses on and I saw 2 people come in. I promise you. Okay, why don't we go to item 11, Ms. Mayfield, and we'll come back to 10 so that there can be a discussion around it. Ms. Mayfield, item 11.
The Governor's Highway Safety Program Grant for Traffic Safety. This is a request for us to accept a grant up to $50,000. The specific questions that I had for these projects, the purchase of the 5 LiDAR radar units, purchase of 1 seat belt condenser, and the regional law enforcement liaisons, travel, training, and meeting expenses. How would this be funded in the future, since this is just a $50,000 grant?
So this is just a portion of that. So this is buy additional LiDAR equipment, the radar guns. So if we didn't get this grant, they wouldn't have additional equipment for this, but eventually, when those age out, it would just be as a regular budget request. So it'd be funded through the budget. There's not
So-
existing budget because we've been getting this funding for these.
So it would be helpful for us to know what that budget line item would become, because this request in front of us is just asking for us to approve for this particular grant. It would be nice to know what our future budget line item is going to be once we no longer have this grant, or if we don't receive the grant. This is just for approval to apply for the grant. So my question was, if the grant is not awarded, are these items still going to be purchased? And if so, at what amount and you just shared from what budget line item, what is going to be the cost of this?
So no,
Do we
ma'am,
know?
police informed me these particular LADAR units would not be purchased at this time, but they would have to come through as a budget request in the future if not.
So if we were not to move forward with this grant, then these items would not be purchased. But we
Correct.
also don't know what the amount of this, since after this grant, it will fold into the budget for future purchases.
Correct. If there was still a need, the technology and the equipment keeps advancing and things
Okay.
change. But correct, if there was still a need, this would come through the budget process.
But it says the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department has been invited to apply for a $50,000 grant. Is that correct?
That is what it said. I was asking about beyond this grant, what is going to be, if we know the cost, and is this cost going to be added into our budget line item? Because we have a number of items over the years where a grant was applied for, the grant was won, but then that item became a part of any particular department's long-term budget to continue funding whatever it was that grant was for. That's why I asked for clarification.
Yeah, I understand that. If it's something that they need and get funding outside of the general fund, I can see why it would continue if it was needed. But I guess do we have a motion on item 11? Oh, Mayor Pro Tem, I'm sorry,
Well,
you asked to be recognized.
Make a motion to
Make a
approve.
motion?
Second.
Wait, but there's a motion to be made, Mr. Driggs.
Motion to approve,
The motion to approve item 11,
and I'd like to make a comment.
and do we have a second?
Second.
All right, a comment from Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, so, I've pulled this, both 10 and 11 are grants that I've pulled for separate votes in the past. These are reoccurring items that come to us every year. The reason why I'm going to vote for it is kind of what Ms. Harris just said. If this grant isn't accepted, what I'm hearing is that this will come through as a budget request. This will come out of our general fund. And I don't, unless this council goes line by line, which we've not been willing to do, to pull these particular LiDAR units out or get rid of the task force that utilizes it, those funds would come out of the funding that we use for other employee salaries or affordable housing. So that's why I'm going to approve this consent agenda item, because it takes that funding from a different source, and we can keep working on changing the policies of CMPD, which we're doing through Safe Charlotte, to try to deal with stuff, for instance, like traffic enforcement, if there's a civilian option for that. So, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and for adoption of authorizing the manager to apply and accept a grant up in an amount up to $50,000 from the Governor's Highway Safety Program, and this is an application for the grant. All in favor, raise your hands, please. 7, opposed? 1, thank you. All right, now we're going to go back to 10. We were having a discussion, we didn't have a sufficient amount of, we were 4 to 4, I think we did not have a sufficient amount of people on the council to attend. So the item 10 was the Governor's Highway Safety Program Grant for Traffic Safety Driving While Impaired Task Force. And Ms. Mayfield made several comments regarding this item. Is there a motion on this item number 10?
Mayor, am I going to repeat my
Would you like to repeat
questions
it?
since two of my colleagues were not
Yes,
here?
sure. Repeat.
So that you know, for item number 11, the questions that I asked is, one, if this grant were not to be approved, where would these items be purchased? Marie answered that they would not. I also asked that if the grant, moving forward after this $50,000 grant, how much, or is there an expectation for us to continue paying for this, since this is only one grant for $50,000, and what is the lifespan of these
Excuse me,
products?
you're looking at 11 now. Your,
Oh, number
sorry,
10. Thank you,
I mean,
Marie.
10, yes.
So for number, and my apologies, colleagues, Marie shared that this is part of Vision Zero. This one was the Driving While Impaired Task Force. I asked if, since this particular project has a budget of it's projected to be $750,265, I asked what other items that we might be reallocating this almost $1 million from for it to go to this task force, as well as I asked if this was a new task force or if it was an existing task force.
All right, so Ms. Harris, would you?
And it's existing, and this is an ongoing grant that we've received for the past 10 years to help fund a portion of this task force.
Okay.
But the rest, and that was my follow-up question. This grant is only for 187, less than 200,000 of this 750,000 grant. So the rest of that cost comes out of the police budget line item.
Yes, ma'am. It's currently funded within the FY23, and it would be requested for funding to continue it in 2024, sorry.
And for my colleagues who are not here, I asked for some additional clarification on this. I had moved for a deferral. The deferral was seconded. We had 3 that voted in support. The mayor called for a motion to approve. That was seconded, and only 4 people.
So I want to be clear, with the write-up that we got, the grant will fund 25% of the task force cost, and I think that's consistent with what they've done in the past. And the city does provide the 75% match, and it's also around driving while impaired task force as well. Okay, so
Right,
do I have a?
Madam Mayor, just my apologies for clarification. What I asked for Ms. Harris was to provide an update for council of how has this task force been tracking up to this point, since this task force has been in operation for a number of years and city dollars are paying 75% of this cost. Has there been an update? And if not, can we get an update prior to approving this so that we can see if this task force is actually as beneficial today as when it was first thought to be created?
Yes, ma'am, and there has been an update, but to your point, it's been a while since it's been before full council.
But we will be able to get an update?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right, item 10, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Second. All right, we have a motion for adoption and a second. Any further discussion? Ms. Mayfield?
Alternative motion, move to defer till we get that information returned.
A substitute motion has been made to defer until additional information is provided. Is there a second? I have a question. Second. Well, we have to have a second, and we have a second. Ms. Ajmir, you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. So, is there is there an urgency behind this item?
I have some police staff, I believe, in the adjoining room, but I mean, the urgency would be if we miss the grant deadline.
Yes,
then-
I'm trying
and
to
these are
find out.
current staffs and current programs, so then we'd have to look how to fund the gap eventually.
Yes, I'm trying to find out if there is a,
When's the deadline?
what's the deadline? And if we could just get more information on this. So what Ms. Mayfield is asking for, sort of like metrics as to how well the task force has done.
And excuse me, if there's staff from police in 280, will they please join us in 267?
All right, so I want to make sure. I thought, Ms. Harris, you said that there would be the ability to provide a report
Yes,
on
sir.
the activity.
Yes.
The question on the timing for the grant, we'll have to ask someone, so. Okay, we have, I tell you, is there anyone that has an answer to that question? If not, then we will defer it until later, all right? If there's no response to the questions, then we can defer it.
I mean, we can defer it. I just,
Oh, I'm sorry, here we are.
okay, there you go.
Okay, guys. Please introduce yourselves.
So yes, we do have a little bit of leeway. We have to apply before May 1st.
All right, so you have the information for May 1st application.
Yes.
All right, there's a substitute motion on the floor to delay until we have a report, and I assume, would that be before the May 1st, that sometime that you would have before the May 1st application time? All right?
Yes, ma'am.
So with that, all in favor of a deferral, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All right, so that motion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Six.
Okay, we have a deferral. Okay, the next item that we have for a separate vote is item 12. No, we did 12, sorry. No, we did 11. Let's go to
did
12.
11.
All right, item 12, engineering services for transportation projects.
That is also mine, Madam Mayor. The question I had for Ms. Marie, since this particular item is to approve contracts with these 10 firms for up to 5 years, I wanted clarification of, are we approving for these 10 only to allocate the below funds for all future engineering or transportation projects?
And Ms. Mayfield, to your point, this is not forever and ever. This is like a pool, so we have a pool that we can, depending on these projects, and I believe they gave you a list of current projects that are in the works that these could be used on, but no, not indefinitely by any means. But this is a pool of vendors to be able to, depending on scopes of work, get quotes from these pools because they've already been vetted and through the insurance and risk processes and make a contract with them.
So for clarification for my colleagues, the total annual expenditure is estimated to be $1,440,000. So if we've identified these 10, I was specifically asking, so when these come back before council for any part of the project, will that drawdown be from that $1,440,000, or are we potentially allocating the $1,440,000 just to have an additional amended or an additional financial request when these individual projects were to come forward?
So we're not currently allocating or setting this aside. These pieces are already embedded within current projects. So if we use them, we would use them, and if not, they would be part of the projects or be, it'd be treated as part of the project budget. So it's not setting aside a contract for this amount. That's just estimating based on the projects we have and the current cost. That's an estimate, just to give you an idea, what are you approving? We're estimated to be around that much.
So what will be helpful for me is, as we move forward with projects, since this is the dollar amount that we have showing before us this evening, and that anyone in the community that's looking at the agenda, that they will be able to see, it will be good if we reference back to this estimated $1,440,000. Otherwise, why list that dollar amount if that dollar amount is not going to be tied to these projects? Whether the project is $300,000, $100,000, we should be able to tie it back to this approval that we're making on this date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a motion on item 12 for engineering service for transportation projects?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, that motion, anyone opposed? Ms. Mayfield, thank you. All right, the next item that Ms. Mayfield requested for a separate vote. Sorry about that. Flipping through these.
Number 15.
It's 15.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Item 15 is the environmental response services. We have identified an opportunity for initial one-year contract with multiple companies, one of them being a SBE. My specific question is tied to the RFP process. I asked if there were any prime SBE or WBE certified companies. Unfortunately, based on a couple of meetings that I had last week with minority business owners, there have been a couple of opportunities that have been missed where we've had a minority business owner who really should have been and could have been the prime on a project that we awarded, but the way the language is created through the RFP process, minority business, specifically black-owned businesses, are directed to be subs versus prime. So I asked the question of, did we have, or did anyone even check to see if we had any primes that potentially could have bid on this project?
And yes, ma'am, so the RFP notice went out to 13 MWSBE firms, and 2 firms submitted proposals, and the firm that was selected is a SBE.
So I would like for, and Mr. Manager, this will be for you. We have an opportunity to look at our current language in our RFP process, because a lot of that language, even in the pre-meetings, are geared to minority-owned businesses to be subs, not necessarily prime, and we have a number of businesses that have grown beyond that level that could very well submit a bid, but the way the language is created, and/or because of the bonding capacity, if you're a smaller business, we have some language out there where you need to have the same bonding capacity as a sub that the prime has. So we have some challenges and some opportunities to create language that actually hits the goals that we've established. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, is there a motion on item 15?
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please, any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, that's unanimous. Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. All right, the next item, Ms. Mayfield, is 16.
And that will be my last one for tonight, possibly. Number 16, professional engineering services for Toomey Distribution Storm Drainage Improvement Project. This is also a funding line item related question. My question is, it is noted on the last bullet before you go into the Charlotte Business Inclusion, additional contracts from this RFQ process will be coming to the City Council for consideration once the projects are defined. We are being asked to approve a contract for up to $580,000 tonight. My question was specifically, will those additional funding requests be paid out of this $580,000? Or are we saying tonight we're approving $580,000 for this particular company, knowing that we're going to receive multiple other financial requests for this particular project?
So, Ms. Mayfield, so this one is the 580 for this specific project. And then based on the RFQ request for qualifications, is again, we're reaching out and getting a pool, but it wouldn't it says for other projects once they're defined. So it's just telling you, we did one process, and we don't want you to think, oh, we just picked one from this process. We picked one, but then we also have these other qualified firms that you might be seeing another one come through based on this same RFQ process when other projects are ready.
So for clarification, for me to understand, my question was, will the future requests come out of this $580,000? The answer to that is no. This is one request to approve this $580,000. They have their minority participation goals, but Charlotte Water was giving us an opportunity to let us know that additional RFQs will be coming our way for consideration.
So based on this one RFQ, additional vendors that were, identified through this qualification process might come through on other projects. But if you get another RCA, request for council action, it would reference this same RFQ.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you,
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor.
Is there a motion for the Toomey?
Move to approve.
All right, we have a motion
Second.
for approval. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hands. All right, thank you very much. I had CAT's cooperative purchasing contract for hybrid electric buses, was asked for comment and a separate vote, but it was for both. I have Ms. Ajmira for a comment, and Mayor Pro Tem or question?
Which item number is that, Mayor?
Item, is the CATS cooperative, is 17.
Item number 17.
Do you want me to ask?
Please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Marie, thank you so much for getting me, getting some of my questions answered. So, I understand that this will be a hybrid diesel bus
Yes,
that we are purchasing, or at least the proposal is for that, from CATS, which does not align with our CAP goals that we have. I would like to understand from Mr. Cagle, what's CAT's plan to meet our 2030 goal of going carbon-free for our CAT's electric fleet? Thank you.
Good evening. Brent Cagle, interim CAT or Transit Director. Yes, Ms. Ejmira, so this is seeking approval for CATS to be able to utilize a cooperative agreement out of the state of Washington. You may recall in October, CATS brought forward this same agreement, but at the time we limited that to only battery electric buses. This cooperative agreement includes diesel hybrids as well. And now we're seeking, or we're making a recommendation for your consideration to expand our ability to utilize the cooperative agreement for hybrids, for these diesel hybrids. So a couple things about the diesel hybrids. The diesel hybrids will replace full diesel vehicles. So to your specific question, they will continue to help us make improvements towards reducing our carbon footprint and meeting our 2030 goals. So they will represent a better vehicle for us. CATS currently has a significant amount of our fleet, our bus fleet, is full diesel. They are not hybrid and they are not BEBs. So these will replace, all of these hybrids will be replacing full diesel vehicles. So that is good. But more to your larger point, I think, and our commitment to BEBs, CATS has a full commitment to BEBs. We are currently doing a pilot program. We have 18 BEBs. We're about halfway through the pilot program, and the pilot is going well. We're learning a lot about BEBs, and one thing that we've already learned is we can provide transit bus services with a BEB fleet. The other thing that we found is there is a lot of infrastructure that goes into supporting those battery electric buses or BEBs. So right now, we have approximately 1/3 of our fleet is beyond its useful life, and the FTA defines the useful life of a bus at 12 years. We have a significant number of buses that are well beyond 12 years, that are beyond their useful life, and we need to replace buses. We're in a situation where we need to replace buses so that we can meet the expectations of our customers and our drivers and our service requirements, but we don't have enough charging infrastructure to fully support all BEB purchases. So what we're recommending for this year, and these are approximate numbers as we know final cost on all of the vehicles, we are recommending, or what we intend to do via this contract, is purchase 15 additional BEBs. So that will bring our fleet 18 plus 15, so to 33, with another 15 approximately hybrids. Those hybrids will replace entirely diesel vehicles, so again, moving us forward. And next year, when we anticipate replacing another 30 buses, we will do the same analysis of our charging capacity and the infrastructure, and we will mix the purchase between hybrids and BEBs until such time that we can just do a full order of BEBs.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. Thank you, Mr. Cagle. So I agree that this is better than full diesel bus, but certainly it's not where we need to be. I understand that we don't have current infrastructure in place. what would it take for us to get to that point, especially from electric vehicle infrastructure perspective? And what's the timeline on this BEB pilot?
Yes, ma'am. So the first question, what will it take? That is an excellent question. We have STV, a consulting company, on board and currently doing a full analysis of infrastructure needs to support a full electric fleet. So today, I don't have that answer for you, but I will, right? And when we have that answer, then we will start to take actions to meet the infrastructure needs. So right now, I don't have that answer, but we're studying that. Right now, the infrastructure we have is 10 charging units or 20 charging ports. There are 2 ports per unit. So we can charge 20 vehicles at any given time. Today, it usually takes roughly 6 hours a day to charge a vehicle. So while we do have, we may be able to support more than 33, we'll be getting towards the top of our capacity. I will also say because of peak hour charging, we try to charge in non-peak hours versus peak hours. So again, STV will be coming back and we will be sharing their results with council and the MTC as they come back. The pilot, we are 9 months into an 18-month study or pilot program. We now have all 18 of the vehicles that we purchased, and so we are about halfway through the pilot program.
Okay. But really, I think the challenge that you are having is the infrastructure, and that's where you need the report from consultants. Is that correct?
That is
Okay.
correct.
And you don't have the timeline as to when we will get that report from consultants?
I will have to follow up with staff, and I can work with Marie to provide that to you and the rest of council. I just don't know it right now off the top of my head.
Okay. So, as someone who relied on public transportation for many years when our family didn't own a car, I understand that reliability is very important. Buses can't afford to break down in the middle while passengers are riding it. But at the same time, I think this is also a matter of equity and health. And as we are looking at CTC, the Charlotte Transportation Center, especially underground, I am even more concerned about our transition to hybrid diesel, because you are talking about communities of color that are that use our public bus system heavily would be impacted by this decision. And this is a 12-year commitment. And that's what worries me. I would like to actually have more information from consultants about what would it take for us to get to that infrastructure-ready capacity before making this such an important decision, because this is a 12-year commitment. We have our 2030 goals. So decision today will ultimately will impact whether we meet our 2030 goals or not. So I'm just, with the answers you provided, I'm not ready to support this as of right now. So I would like to make a motion to defer this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I was going to suggest that motion as well, Ms. Ajmera. Not to belabor the point, I know we have important business to get to, but, or just from simple arithmetic that you kind of put out there, you said 20 ports at 6 hours, that's, 60 buses that could be potentially charged in a 24-hour period. But of course, I think that would be a bus operations situation and issue, and I think we all know pretty well right now that's a RAP-T-Dev, or however it's pronounced, conversation with the RFP that's going out and the consideration that we might be having on top of all the points that Ms. Ajmera referred to, on top of the conversations were happening about how do we invest in our overall infrastructure, but particularly our bus infrastructure, I would hope that we can defer this item and have a little bit, give us the ability to have a bit of those in the weeds conversations, whether that be one-on-one or as a group to learn a bit more, because 12 years is a long time. I don't think we would be able to trade those in or something like that. And if we were, for instance, to get the capacity in 2 years or something like that, you're shaking your head no?
You are correct. Once we purchase those, so the useful life is 12 years, but what that also means is the expectation is that we will utilize those vehicles for a minimum of 12 years.
Yeah, so I would hope, I would hope we join Ms. Ajmira's motion for deferment of this item until we can have appropriate conversations and work. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mr. Driggs? Ms.
I'd just
Mayfield?
like to ask the same question. Is there any particular time sensitivity around this decision?
So I think that it's okay to defer. We definitely need to order buses. We are starting to get to a point. So we have talked a lot about vacancies and how that affects our ability to make service. At this point, as we fill vacancies, we are now becoming concerned about the quality of the fleet and our ability to make service with the fleet we have. We need to order buses. Can we talk about this? I believe we can. I do not know, though, right now exactly how long STV will be doing their work, and it could be quite a while. I will also say once STV is completed, we will have to make capital programming choices around building the infrastructure. So I just can't give you an answer on how quickly we could have the infrastructure.
Will you have anything new to tell us a month from now?
Other than when STV will be done, no, sir.
All right, Ms. Mayfield is next. Ms.
Thank
Mayfield?
you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Cagle, question for you. Regarding this hybrid fuel bus, what, if any, impact, or has there even been a study for our neighbors that have these underground bus stations? Are they using hybrid diesel? Are we looking at the health, environmental potential impact, since it seems like we're moving forward with having our underground station? These buses will be making their way into that space as well. Has there been any research on who is using hybrid diesel, and if they are, if there's any impact in Colorado or other places that have underground stations?
So I do not know specifically if other places have. What I will say is we expect that with the CTC, while we will be transitioning to full electric fleet, there will be traditional fuel vehicles that enter the CTC. We know that that will happen. And part of design will be having air handling systems to maintain the highest standards in air quality inside the CTC, inside of the facility. But there will be traditional, whether they're diesel or gasoline, there will be traditional fuel vehicles that from time to time will enter the CTC. And as we transition the entire fleet, bus fleet, to BEBs, that air handling system, it will have it, it will help even more because the emissions will continue to reduce. But the hybrids will have reduced emissions from what the current fleet predominantly has today.
So right now, how many hybrid buses do we currently have on the streets?
So I'm going to talk in general terms. We have about 315 total vehicles. We have 18 BEBs and roughly 70 hybrids, right? So that's about 88 hybrids or BEBs, predominantly hybrids. So that leaves the majority of the fleet, roughly 2/3, as traditional diesel.
Thank you.
All right, I thought I had a speaker over here. So I'm going to come back, we'll start Mayor Pro Tem and then come back to Ms. Ajmira.
Yeah, just to be clear, you said we have 18 battery electric buses, and you just kind of laid out a formula that says in one 24-hour period, we could charge 60 buses in a 24-hour period. So I would like to know between now and whenever this comes back, what is wrong with the bus operations that would not be able to charge 18 plus 15, which would be 33, which should seemingly be possible given the infrastructure that we currently have. So I would like to know a little bit more about the infrastructure needs. But also, what has been said here is that that infrastructure is the issue for not ordering these buses, right? I'm not seeing a budgetary issue, and I'm not seeing an ability to fulfill an order issue. So if we needed to order buses that were battery electric buses, that could be an order that could be fulfilled. And should I be able to extrapolate that from the information that is given?
Yes, sir. If we were going to order all battery electric buses in this order, we could do that. But I will point out, so two things. One, to agree with you. In theory, over a 24-hour period, 6 hours to charge, roughly speaking. But you also have to line up when the fleet is being utilized and when it can be charged. And we're also attempting to charge in non-peak hours as well. So again, while I agree there is some additional capacity, what we were suggesting is we don't push it to the edge of total use on capacity, because if we end up with a battery electric fleet that we cannot charge properly, we have an issue.
Well, I hear that. That's why I would like to know a little bit more about this infrastructure, because I just see this in a sentence, and I think we need to get a little more information before we make that level of investment. Thank you.
Ms. Ajmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was doing the same math, and it's not adding up, because I have an electric car, so I keep a very close tab on charging. But I guess the consulting report will certainly tell us more about it. I'm trying to understand this whole infrastructure point here. Other thing, you talked about hybrid. I just want to make sure. So there is hybrid electric and there is hybrid diesel. And the request that it's in fuel, I'm talking about gas. So this one is specifically for hybrid diesel. Is that right?
These are diesel electric
Not
hybrids.
gas.
These are, yes, these are diesel electric hybrids.
Yeah.
So I get,
So
yes, ma'am.
in our fleet, we have 18 battery electric buses.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
then we have hybrid. So within even hybrid, if we break it down, how many hybrid diesel do we have?
All. 100% of the hybrid vehicles that we have are electric or diesel electric or electric diesel hybrids.
Oh, got it. Okay.
There are other types of hybrid vehicles that do not rely on diesel.
Right.
But in this region, there is not ready availability of those other alternates that would replace the diesel, right? So there's electric plus something else.
Yeah.
And in this market, that plus something else is not readily available.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. So I just wanted to make sure that one point that Brent brought up isn't lost. But before I do that, let's take a big step back. So we do have the CAP, and we're all supportive. It's a council policy. It's a plan. We're implementing it. And 2 years ago, I don't even think, while council was discussing BEBs for cats, we hadn't even thought about it, really. So having this pilot is good, and we're halfway through the pilot. Ultimately, Brent has to buy buses, because as we ramp back up, we can't have issues that relate to availability of the buses as well as the frequency of the buses. So we're trying our best to, I guess, do both. Try to keep the fleet up to date with the hybrid electric buses, as well as continue with the BEVs. And again, in the report which will come out, there's some challenges with the BEVs. And so reliability, things like that. So we're not trying to say one thing and do something different, but I'm not so sure that Brent's going to be able to give you much more other than he needs to start buying some buses.
I agree with that, with 2 underlines.
I would say that as the MTC is looking at this, if you ask the folks that ride the bus on a regular basis in our committee, reliability is the #1 factor for having a successful system. Without all of the investments we've made and the technology around how to use the app on the phones and do all of that, if it's not reliable, nothing really works. So I don't know the answer. I thought the buses were electric and diesel. Is that the order that we would be making? So you'd still have some charging, but the diesel portion of it. So I don't know the answer to this. I know that we are going to learn a lot more because there are some communities that are using electric buses, but they're usually smaller than what our community and our system would be from the information that we've gotten before. So I think everyone has said something. I guess the question is, we have a motion on the floor for a deferral of this. I guess the question would be, when would a deferral impact operations or reliability?
What I would say is if it's the council's wishes to defer this, I would like to bring back this item as soon as possible. A deferral of any substantial amount of time, we need to make a bus order as soon as possible.
All right, so you have a motion for deferral on this item. All in favor of the deferral, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have another? Did I see another hand over here at 4? 5. All right, I don't see 5. Raise your hand, please. Oh, well, Ms. Watlington's.
Because she walked away, automatic yes.
It's an automatic yes. All in favor, please raise your hand. Do I have a motion? The motion does not pass because we did not have 6 votes.
Question.
Yes?
Is it appropriate to make a motion? Could you just be authorized to order just a straight up diesel bus or whatever you need there?
What?
Could you
We are
make that
not
work?
making that recommendation.
If that was our will to do that, would that be easier and cheaper and more efficient?
No, sir.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to approve item number 17 for the cooperative purchasing contract for hybrid electric buses?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in
Second.
favor? Please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There I have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. No action on.
It would be helpful if you just asked for the no votes.
Okay, yes, all of those opposed to the motion to approve the cooperative purchasing contract for the hybrid electric buses, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
5.
5. So is that a tie?
That would be a tie.
No, I mean,
That would be a tie.
that is a tie. So I'll vote for the cooperative purchasing contract for hybrid electric buses, and we'll move on. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, the next item that we have on our agenda
Was number 25, yeah.
is item 25. Item 25 is a property transaction for University Research Park sidewalk for approving a condemnation for this. I remember Bob Hageman being our attorney, and he said that when we have these condemnations, we're putting it on for a third party that's non-partial, ready to make the decision, because most people think the city didn't offer them enough, and most time the city thinks that they're offering them fair market value. So somebody has to decide, so it goes to court. I remember him saying that so many times for us. So anyway, do I have who asked, Ms. Mayfield, who asked for item 25? Ms. Mayfield?
I asked for it as
Oh,
well.
Ms. Johnson, I'm so sorry. It says CM Mayfield on the
Right,
question
I asked
sheet.
the question, but Ms.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is, I wanted to know more about, Ms. Mayfield did ask about it in advance, and I wanted to know, could we defer this until the property owner's concerns were addressed? It's in District 4. The property owner looks like he's concerned about the easement, is that correct?
So, and this is one that's a high priority, so we had almost reached agreement and got it finalized with the owner, and then the owner sold the property. So now been working with the new owner, and they are wanting, it's the order of documentation, and there's something that their lender has to sign off on before they can sign the right of entry. So it is, but to your point, it's not dollars, it's just, this is just letting us go ahead and move forward with the project where we're waiting on the lender and the paperwork from the sign off from the homeowner. And we'll continue to work with them, but this is the last parcel, and we're going to restart after you approve this, and we work with them, we'll start approximately 8-month bid process, and then hopefully start construction in October, and it'll take 6 months to complete the construction, but this is time sensitive for the construction window.
And this is construction for what?
So it's the sidewalk.
Oh,
So
to
it's a
build sidewalk.
university research sidewalk project.
And you said you were already in negotiation when the property was sold?
Right, it was,
Okay.
and then it was sold, it wasn't finalized, and then it was sold in July 21st. I mean, we were working with the first owner in July 2021, and then we started working with the new owner in October of this past of 22. So we've been working with the new owner for several months now.
Okay, yeah, I didn't hear from the owner. This would have been something for residents to reach out to council. Perhaps I could advocate a little more. My question is if was concern from the owner, why we wouldn't defer it until it was resolved. However, if you say you were working with the previous owner and time is of the essence and this is for sidewalks, then that answers my question. I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve item
Second.
number 25. Thank
We
you.
have a motion by Ms. Johnson, a second by Ms. Mayfield. Any further discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Please raise your hand. That motion passes.
Thank you.
All right.
We're through the consent agenda.
Yes, the consent agenda.
Solid.
Okay. Ordinarily, we would have a little bit more time. We have had the chief waiting. Mr. Jones, you have any introductory comments prior to the chief's presentation?
No, I don't, Mayor, but what I will say is, there's an opportunity also under the manager's report, because what we had lined up tonight would be the fire update with Chief Johnson and planning for the future, Allison Craig. So if you need some extra space, we could do it to the manager's report. But if there aren't any questions, Mayor, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Johnson.
So we'll go with the chief's report, and then we'll have Allison Craig at the manager's report. All right. Chief Johnson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. Reginald Johnson, Fire Chief of the Charlotte Fire Department. I want to thank you all and Manager Jones for the opportunity to talk about the good work that the Charlotte Fire Department does and share some statistics with you. A lot of times you'll see response as being our primary function, fire trucks rolling up and down the road, but we're an all hazards department that does a lot more than just respond to emergencies, and I think you'll be able to see that as we go through the presentation. Charlotte Fire Department is a ISO Class 1 and a 5-time accredited department. With those two accolades, that puts Charlotte Fire Department as the top 1% of all departments in the country. As you can see, we have 43 fire stations, over 320 square miles, and every time we approve an annexation, the square miles get bigger and bigger, and we have to provide the services there. Charlotte Fire Department is one of the few agencies that actually has minimum staffing, and that's 270 positions need to be filled every day, 24 hours a day, 365, and a lot of that comes from NFPA standard, National Fire Protection Association standard 1710, and we'll get into that a little bit here. So how do we evaluate the fire department? We really evaluate on response times. And this slide here really presents to you what response times look like. From the time you answer the phone until the first unit gets on scene, our goal is to have a unit on scene within 6 minutes for all emergencies and within 6:20 for structure fires 90% of the time. There's also another component of the NFPA standard that includes the fourth unit response, which means we have to have 16 firefighters on scene within the 10 minutes and 20 seconds. And so you'll see how important it is that telecommunicators play a big role in this, turnout times for us, and then response times play a big role in us reaching this goal. So let's get into some numbers. Charlotte Fire Department ran over 143,000 incidents last year. Of those, a primary number of those, just like any other metro-sized city, are going to be EMS responses. We had over 91,000 of those, but you can see the number of fires total as well as the number of structure fires that we've had in the city in fiscal year 22. So let's get back to NFPA 1710 and talk a little bit about our response times. And the top number is going to be the fourth unit total response time. That's where we need to have 4 units on scene before 10 minutes and 20 seconds, 90% of the time. And as you can see, we fluctuate up and down there, but we primarily meet the standard for the fourth unit. Bottom line, the red line is the first unit. And as you can see from about fiscal year 21 or so, we've had a slow decline in meeting that 90% of the time. And so that basically is telling you we're not able to meet that 90th percentile over the past several years as we continue to drop in response times. This is another way of talking about that. The top line is more about the number of incidents we run per day. As you can see in fiscal year 22, we ran almost 400 incidents a day here in the city. We have a note here about COVID in fiscal years 20 and 21. It's kind of an anomaly because there were some months during COVID that we actually didn't run a significant number of EMS calls, and those numbers were taken into account. The bottom number is our actual response times as you see them. And if we're talking about 6 minutes for all emergencies and 6:20 for structure fires, you can see our numbers have slowly ticked up. And so far in 23, we've crested the 7-minute mark. So we're not anywhere close to 6 or 6:20 at this point in time. Why is that important? I think it's important for a number of reasons. Our response times, structure fires is one for those people that may be tracked. We do know that fire grows and doubles in seconds, not minutes anymore. And so if we don't get there fast, fires get out of control. But there's another component of that, which is a CPR component. And that's a return of spontaneous circulation is what we're looking for. And you can see our numbers have slowly declined. I believe COVID may have played a small role in that, but response times also play a role in that if we're getting there within 6 minutes or 6:20. And you can see we're still above the national average. And typically we're in competition with Seattle, Washington as far as having the best numbers in the country. And we do focus on our CPR training quite a bit to make sure that we're doing that as far as focused CPR. And we still have numbers above the national average, but again, our numbers are starting to slip a little bit. So let's look at call volume or incident volume just by type. Our structure fires over the past 5 years has decreased about 10%. And I'd like to tip my hat to the fire prevention and fire and life safety for making that happen, because the actual responsibility of preventing fires actually falls to the fire department. So it's not just responding to them. Our goal is to also prevent fires. And I think, as you can see, that has occurred. Now, the other incidents, as you can see, have gone up anywhere from 11 to 28%, which includes EMS calls, hazardous materials, technical rescue, and other fires. And so we have seen an increase in call volume. I think that's no strange thing for me to mention here. A lot of you all have heard me talk about the .38 calls, right? So every time we have a new apartment, a new townhouse, or a house, we're talking about an additional .38 calls for service. So when you approve 100, 150 apartment building, those are additional call services that will end up being added to our current call volume. So as people come to Charlotte, our call volume continues to grow, and this just shows that as far as the other incidents. So this is a heat map on the left that you all received, I believe, in December that kind of highlighted just a couple places where we're not currently meeting our response times. I will point out that Firehouse 45, Hidden Valley, that's been a hot spot for a little bit, but thanks to General Services and thanks to you all, City Manager and Ryan, we're able to start construction on that station within the next couple months. And that's right there at North Tryon and Orr Road, right across the street from the bowling alley. And I think that's going to pay huge dividends in that area. And why do I say that? If you look on the right-hand side, this is a before and after of Fire Station 43. So as you can see the before picture, we had a red spot right there near 77 and Clanton Road. We knew that. Firehouse 43 was put in service at the end of 2020, and now look at what after 43 has happened, right? And so we have been able to address that. So infill stations and new companies address our response times. It's just that simple. As the city grows, the city has to continue to invest in the department so that we're able to address these. And I know that Mr. Bergman mentioned a little bit about the Miranda Road firehouse the other day in his presentation. So that's obviously on the minds of the city manager as well as budget. So that's a good news story at the end. It just shows what the improvements can happen with infill stations. So what else do? We have a training division. We had over 400,000 hours of training. This does not even include recruit training, and it does not include any of the administrative personnel training. So we require 236 to 260 hours of training per year for firefighters, and that's based on ISO and state requirements. Fire and life safety education. One of our metrics is that we reach every third grade class in CMS within city limits. That's 92 classes, and we met that 100% of the time in fiscal year 22. We do a number of other outreach, which includes some middle schools, high schools, as well as our senior residents. We also reach out to them and engage them as well. We've done a number of canvases. And I printed this out just so I make sure I get it right. Our life safety education team received an award of excellence from North Carolina Fire and Life Safety Association and North Carolina Office of State Fire Marshal's Office. They just received that a couple weeks ago. So the work that they're doing is being recognized at the state level. And our senior educator, Amy Ray, received the B.T. Fowler Lifetime Achievement Award for fire and life safety. And so we have an outstanding team in our fire and life safety. And as I mentioned before, we've seen a reduction in fires over the last 5 years. And so they do a great job.
So what's the dog's name?
That is Cat the dog.
Cat the dog. Thank you. That is great, Chief. That is great.
One of several of our new canine programs, but she was the first. So we have a fire marshal's office and fire investigations. So our fire marshal's office do building inspections, as many of you all know, and they do plans review. So as we're getting new facilities or new buildings here, they're reviewing plans to make sure that they have the proper fire suppression systems to make sure that the building is safe. The inspectors go out and make sure that the ones that are currently operating are also safe. And it's not only for the people that work there, not only for the people that live there, but it's also for our first responders, right? If we can prevent a fire, then we're not putting ourselves in harm's way. Fire investigations is part of a joint task force, and with that is we have several of our own investigators, but we also have some CMPD people on the task force as well as ATF members on there. And you can see we have achieved a 40.4% clearance rate, which is outstanding when you're looking at the national clearance rate anywhere between 15 and 20%. So our people do an outstanding job. And just the other day, there was a news report, I think it was on WBTV, but I can't remember, where we're talking about an increase of about 20% on set fires here in the city. And so the purpose of them is to go out and investigate every fire. And this dog, Mayor, is Captain. Captain is our ATF dog that we got back probably less than a year ago. We were without the ATF dog for a period of time, and this really helps us to start to address a lot of the incendiary fires that unfortunately are set here. But we're able to clear those, and with CMPD able to make arrests if they're able to determine the person that did that. Fire communications, we talked about that in NFPA 1710. Everything starts with the phone call. I know right now when you call, it goes to CMPD, the primary public safety answering port, and they say, please fire medic. When they say fire, it comes here, and our folks process that call within 60 seconds, typically answering the phone call within 10 seconds, then processing that and getting it out the door. December 24 of 2022, when we had like 8-degree temperatures here, I'm sure a lot of people remember that, we had a record day of over 1,400 calls because of busted pipes and all the things that we were running, and we were quite busy on that day. Again, another award-winning team here. They won the Association of Public Safety Communication Officials International 2022 Team of the Year, and we're talking about across the country. And so that's a big deal. Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. Some of the other things they do besides answer the call is part of the field comm unit. So whenever our people run outside the city or we have some radio issues, our folks are responding with them to make sure we have communication, which, as you all know, is something that's very important in life safety. Just some more information from the alarm, which shows you the high numbers that they stay at when it comes to answering a call within 10 seconds. We're around 99%. That's pretty daggone good when 90% is the standard. And the same thing with dispatching within 60 seconds. We still have a lot of high numbers. I'd like to thank the manager, Ryan Bergman, and Sheila Simpson for helping us over the past several months address our telecommunicator vacancy rate. I know we were addressing CMPD, but fire was included in that, and we're very appreciative that we have seen a positive outcome from the changes that we've made over the last several months. We have several new hires in their training right now. So a lot of people think we just put out fires, but we do a lot more than that. And I say all hazards, that means all hazards. And so we have hazmat team, we have a task force, the NC Task Force 3, and these are sometimes considered state assets. We have the regional response team for hazmat, and then we have our task force team that does swift water, collapse, and a number of other things. Those resources are here in the city, right? They're not just for state response. And so it's a good thing that they're here because they can provide those responses. As you can see the picture from the unfortunate scaffolding accident the other day, and we do a number of the pickoffs with the cranes because of the amount of construction that goes on here when a construction worker gets injured. We do have our PAC teams, police assist companies, and we work closely with CMPD. It really is cutting edge here in the department, how well we work with CMPD. It really deals with some SWAT teams, some civil unrest, and really it is there to make sure that they're safe and we're safe as we're addressing some of those issues. And so that is something that is well over 5 years old, and we still train and work with them on a daily basis. As you all know, city manager's favorite friend there, Division Chief White Graham, is our deputy director over emergency management, which does fall under the fire department. And so we're responsible for being prepared for planned and unplanned emergencies. Planned emergencies now seem to be a little bit more of our special events and just being prepared for those, soccer games and other things where you have over 20,000 people visiting in an area. One of the key parts about Charlotte that not a lot of people know is we're one of the metro cities that actually sit between two nuclear power plants, right? McGuire and Catawba. And so every year we're evaluated by FEMA on our responses to a possible nuclear emergency. And so we've passed with flying colors because of the amount of work that gets done in emergency management. That's why you never hear anything about it, because we're doing well. Let's talk a little bit about our community engagement. Many of you all know about Camp Hornets Nest and Camp Ignite. Both of them, respectively, are for young men and young women, usually in high school. We're able to show them a little bit about the fire department and letting them know that that could be a career for them. as well as just helping them gain a little bit of confidence, learn how to be a leader, being part of a team. There's a lot of things that go on there. And this is a free camp. You don't have to pay anything. And so as you can see, we try to keep a diverse group there so that we can actually show them a little bit about the fire department. I'm going to speed up a little bit here. Citizens Fire Academy, we started that in 2018. It really was to educate the citizens and residents of Charlotte to say, hey, fire department does more than just respond to fires and EMS calls. And so it has been a huge success, and we usually do that in August, September timeframe every year since 2018. Donation drives, we're always engaged in that. As far as Steve's Coats for Kids, we do school tools, which goes to Classroom Central, and then we collect toys with CMPD at a lot of fire stations, and so we're always engaged in those type of drives. Some of the other community engagement efforts, we have Halloween candy drops that we've done with Piedmont Natural Gas. We do the parades. We've done a number of other things. The picture on the left is when a lot of our tech rescue folks went out to Levine Cancer opportunity there to do that, and so we stay engaged there. Before I turn it back over to you, Mayor, I just want to say I know we've received some questions about medic response and the reconfiguration, and so our plan is to write a white paper for you all this week and get it to you all and really talk a little bit about medic, talk about how they're, their board of directors and things of that nature, and we'll get that to you all so that we can address a lot of the concerns about the reconfiguration response. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions or comments for the Chief, Mr. Driggs?
Yes, Chief, for one, we're very fortunate to have an award-winning fire department, so many thanks to you and all of your people. First question was about staffing. My impression from visiting some of the fire stations is there's virtually a waiting list of people who would love to work for CFD. So are you able to recruit all the people you need? Do you have a full complement?
So I would say yes to that. We get that question often, even internal. We have seen a decline from the numbers we saw in 2015, and I think any public safety agency is going to tell you they had a decline in applicants, but we do not have an issue with filling recruit classes.
And my second question, pretend the manager's not here, okay? Is the pipeline of projects for new fire stations, in your mind, sufficient to keep up with the growth in demand?
I think the recent work with the 3 stations, I know we're talking about Miranda Road, I think yes, there's been highlighted that we have a need for infill stations and they're being met.
All right, I'll talk to you after the meeting. Thanks. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
All right, Mr. Winston?
I think I'm following up with Mr. Driggs' question right there. On slide 3, it says that we have 43 fire stations. How many fire stations do we need to meet the goals that we have?
I think with the heat map that was provided, I think we've identified those locations. River District, we know with the annexation, and so that's already will be on the books. I'm pretty confident of that. 45 is Great Star Construction, like we mentioned. I'll get to the heat map here. And then we just talked about the Miranda Road, which is relatively new, right? Because a lot of that area was county beforehand, but the annexations have made it part of city. And so now it's time for us to start to address the incident response there. So we have in plans, I think, a sufficient number of stations to start to address some of these issues.
All right, thank you. Now, I would love, Mr. Jones, obviously we need to, once that white paper comes out, a way that we can have a conversation amongst council about that. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Chief, it will be helpful to know as we continue to grow and we're building density and we're getting taller and taller, are there any challenges that you're foreseeing with our current trucks or even the new ones as far as your response time and getting to these higher levels when we're seeing a lot of high rises coming? Is that, here's an opportunity to let us know what we can be considering when we're looking at potentially approving a project and with the upcoming language of the UDO that's going to be a living document.
All right, yes, ma'am. So I have to start off by thanking Chief Redden and the Planning Division that actually put a lot of these numbers together, and they really keep us in line with NFPA 1710. And so when you start talking about high rises, we see going down South Boulevard, and I think there's some in Ballantyne and some other places that'll be coming. Now you're talking about vertical response times. And so NFPA 1710, it really talks about density. So when we reach the number of density, then yes, we need to start thinking about increasing our minimum staffing from 4 to 5, just because of the amount of time that it takes to get to some of those. And if anybody saw the fire in Chicago, they kept leapfrogging and leapfrogging in that high rise. The vertical response is real, and we just need to be able to consider that. I have shared that with the manager Jones, and so he and I will definitely have a conversation when it's time to talk about upping staffing from 4 minimum to 5, and it may be in certain areas, you know, like Uptown, maybe at Station 2 and some others, but we'll have that conversation. As far as trucks, we are in the process, and we've already purchased one. It just, unfortunately, supply chain affects everything, and so we haven't gotten our TDA, tractor-drawn aerial, or tillers. We are getting those just because of the amount of apartment buildings that we see out here, the 4- and 5-story ones, having courtyards, having to get around, and starting to address that so we have better access.
Any other questions? Chief, thank you. I know that you were here for a while the last time, and you sat patiently, so we really appreciate you coming this afternoon. I think that, of course, we'll see you when it's time for budget and the CIP again, I expect.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are really right on time to go downstairs for our meeting. Ms. Mayfield, you'll be doing our invocation tonight?
I am.
All right. Thank you. Let's head on down and get started as quickly as we can. Everyone, really appreciate those of you who are in attendance tonight and are joining us at the Government Center in our council chambers. I'm going to also welcome those that are watching on our city television channel as well as any other streaming mechanism, and please follow us and continue to follow us on social media. We are now calling the order our policy portion of our agenda, and so before we do dive into our work, I'd like to have introductions made around the dais. I also want to say that we begin our meetings with an expression of inspiration, and the council member who delivers that chooses the way that they'd like to deliver their message to all of us, because this is meant to solemnize our proceedings, that we as a collective group have the opportunity to have a moment to pause and listen to hear from a council member what is important to them at that point. I also want you to recognize that Councilmember Mayfield will give our invocation, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance following Councilmember Mayfield. Ms. Mayfield, after introductions, we're going to start with our city clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Dimple Ajmera, at large.
Good evening. I am Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, District 4.
Good evening, Lawana Mayfield, Council at Large.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Tar Pakari, District 6.
Good evening, Dante Anderson, District 1.
Good evening. I'm Victoria Watlington, and I serve you as your City Council Member representing District 3.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
All right, Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight, in honor of the fact that we are still in February and we are celebrating Black History Month, I have chosen a poem by the renowned Miss Gwendolyn Brooks. This particular poem is titled Primer for Blacks, and as a preface, this particular poem speaks on the necessity of accepting one's Black heritage and a possible unified future for all Black people. And this can be found online. Again, Primer for Blacks by Ms. Gwendolyn Brooks. Blackness is a title, is a preoccupation, is a commitment Blacks are to comprehend, and in which you are to perceive your glory. The conscious shout of all that is white, it's great to be white. The conscious shout of the slack in the Black, it's great to be white. Thus, all that is white has white strength and yours. The word Black has geographic power, pulls everybody in. Blacks here, Blacks there, Blacks wherever they may be. And remember, you Blacks, what they told you. Remember your education. One drop maketh a brand new Black. Oh, mighty drop. And because they have given us kindly so many more of our people. Blackness stretches over the land. Blackness, the black of it, the rust red of it, the milk and cream of it, the tan and yellow tan of it, the deep brown, middle brown, high brown of it, the olive and ochre of it. Blackness marches on. The huge, the pungent object of our prime outright is to comprehend, to salute and to love the fact that we are Black, which is our ultimate reality, which is the lone ground from which our meaningful metamorphosis, from which our prosperous staccato group or individual can rise. Self-shriveled Blacks begin with gaunt and marvelous concession. You are our costume and our fundamental bone. All of you, you colored ones, you Negro ones, those of you who proudly cry, I am half Indian. Those of you who proudly screech, I've got the blood of George Washington in my veins. All of you, you proper Blacks, you half Blacks, you wish I weren't Blacks. You. And as we celebrated the homegoing of Judge Shirley Fulton this past weekend, who clearly walked in rooms where she was the only Black female. Her legacy will live on, and I hope you receive this message as the message it was intended to be, and that is to be proud to be Black. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight, we're going to start our policy with the city manager's report, so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jones to introduce the staff and the reason for this
Okay. So,
report.
thank you, Mayor, members of council. Allison, you can come on down. So what we did is during the action review, Chief Johnson was able to give us a year-end report with fire. And so that went very well, and we said that we would take the second report and move it here to the chamber. So Allison will give you an update of where we are. So thank you, Allison.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, Mayor, and members of council. We're excited to be here tonight to talk about the important work that planning has ahead in the implementation of the Charlotte 2040 Comprehensive Plan and the UDO. I have our two project managers here tonight to really talk about what's next with each of those efforts. We're going to start with community area planning. And this is something that people are really excited about starting to talk about the details and the specifics that they care about in their unique communities. And so Alicia is going to talk about what the process looks like, what's in an area plan, what you can expect from the process, the schedule, and how we're engaging people in an equitable and inclusive manner. The second part of the presentation is going to be talking about the UDO, wanting you to understand what to expect as we approach the effective date. So we've had some really great attendance at the UDO University. We're about halfway through the semester right now. Laura will also talk about text amendments. We have said all along the UDO is intended to be a living document, and we are proposing a couple text amendments that will be before you before the UDO effective date, and we'll certainly be considering others after the effective date. She'll talk about zoning changes that may be proposed in coordination with the area planning, and then look at an overall schedule of what things look like from a zoning and UDO's perspective. So to start, I'm going to turn it over to Alicia now to talk about area planning.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Mayor, members of council, and city manager for the opportunity to share about our upcoming work and planning. If you could advance to the next two slides. The next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So I wanted to start our conversation tonight by just reiterating or grounding us in our why. Like, why do we start both of these projects at the same time? A lot of people thought we were crazy, but I think we want to remind ourselves that we started it to modernize our toolbox for how we grow and develop over the next 20 years. A lot of our area plans were old, our zoning ordinance was old, and it just wasn't quite meeting the need for our community or those who choose to do business in Charlotte. The other reason is to provide greater transparency and predictability in how we grow and develop. So if you're a neighborhood, you know what where the growth is going and what that vision and our goals are, and also what are the development rules to accommodate that growth and that vision within our community. And also, the last thing I wanted to point out is an equitable approach, as Allison mentioned. We wanted to make sure that we, as we're thinking about these two major projects, how do we approach them in an equitable manner, providing voices who aren't typically heard in these types of processes to be allowed to have a seat at the table. And so we're moving forward with implementing the comprehensive plan as a joint approach. As we develop them together, we're looking at implementation as a joint approach as well. And what this will do for our community is provide a seamless engagement experience. So they will have the opportunity to talk about both projects in the same setting, and to also understand how the two projects connect. The other goal of the joint approach is to also leverage staff resources. It's a 2-year project, and we want to make sure that we are leveraging our staff resources for our interdepartmental partners, as well as our county and regional partners. And the last thing that we wanted to make sure that our residents are able to experience both projects at the same time and provide feedback and have a clear indication of what their feedback will be used for as it relates to both projects. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So here's how we plan to do the work over the next 2 years. The first, we're kicking off now and already started pre-planning task, and that's where we are getting a better understanding of the geographies in which we'll be engaging in and doing the work. Also coordinating with our Unified Development Ordinance team, the alignment rezoning project, looking at our communications, making sure we're understanding and creating messaging that the community can understand, as well as making sure that we are connecting on and technically on both projects on a more frequent basis over the next 2 years. So the project is intended to kick off last month. We had a soft kickoff and then wrap up in 2025 with adoption, a joint and collaborative adoption process. Next slide. Next slide, please. I wish I could control it. Next slide. So as the next slide's coming up, I'll dive a little bit into the community area planning process. What is a community area plan? And some may be asking, how is this different from the previous planning efforts that we've done in the community? So the purpose of community area plans is to provide a community-level guidance for growth and development. It takes the comprehensive plan, the 30,000-foot view, and goes down into the neighborhoods to have those in-depth conversations about growth, development, how do we create good places, mobility, open space, capital facilities, and other amenities to make great places. How we're approaching these are very different than the past. We have 14 planning geographies, and that's excluding Uptown because you recently adopted a Center City plan, and we'll do a light touch to that, but spend most of our time in the 14 geographies. And this we'll start this process for the entire city this year. That way, no one community is left out, or there's a delay in when we will engage the community on a community area plan. So the approach is equitable, and we're using larger geographies than we have before. Some of you may recall that the area planning process in the past, it would take us 3-4 years to do one neighborhood. Now we're looking at collections of neighborhoods, communities, and how they relate to each other. It allows them to have meaningful dialogue about their similarities, break down the barriers between the neighborhoods that are oftentimes looked at as just kind of stopping points, but how do we reimagine what those barriers are? And also just to be efficiently in identifying citywide policy updates to the comprehensive plan and for those areas that may be similar. So that is what the community area planning process will entail. Next slide, please. So here's the process and the schedule for community area planning. We have 5 phases of the project. The first 4 are centered around plan development. That's where we'll spend 2023, 2024 working with the communities to develop these plans. And then the last phase, which is winter 2025, that's when we'll do review and adoption with the community. And I'll dive into the plan elements in the next slide. So here are the key components of the plan. There are 4 major components. The first is setting the stage for the community, really helping them to understand how the broader goals of the comprehensive plan relate to their area. Really getting some understanding about that, understanding the existing conditions and identifying some challenges and opportunity. That stage will help us to understand how to confirm or recommend refinements to the policy map. As you may recall, the policy map was adopted last March, and it was a citywide effort, and we applied a methodology, and we know we didn't get to the granular detail that this process will actually help us to get to. And then we'll also look at some focus areas within these geographies where we know there are lots of areas of transition or areas that need somewhat of a mini charrette to understand how to address some of those very specific needs. And so the last two components of the plan will look at the implementation strategies. What are some of the assets and amenities to realize the vision? What are some of the infrastructure improvements in those key areas that we need to highlight? And then talk about what's the phasing strategy for those investments and possibly some prioritization. So at the end of the day, people will have some idea of what the comp plan means to me, how is it being used to make decisions via the policy map, and what are some of the investments that need to be made in specific areas to realize that vision. Next slide. So what you can expect from the community area plan, I think a lot of what is needed to build trust in this process is to be transparent about what these plans will do. The plan will provide guidance for decision-making, but will not create regulations or law. It will identify investments in key areas to achieve that vision, but it will not guarantee funding. That's through the budget process that the manager leads each year, and understanding that we must communicate that implementation doesn't happen overnight. It will possibly recommend zoning changes. That's why we're partnering with our rezoning team, but it will not automatically rezone property. The plans will also provide guidance on more appropriate development in these specific neighborhoods, but it will not stop development. So I think a lot of building trust in our community is making sure they understand what these plans will and will not do. Next slide, please. So the expected outcomes and what this process will yield is 14 very succinct, highly illustrative documents that we are anticipating being less than 50 pages each. So it will not be this long, drawn-out document, keeping in mind that we're building on the comprehensive plan. We're not starting from scratch with the vision and goals for our community, nor are we starting from scratch on the policy map. This is a process to refine it at a more granular level. And then we'll also have a revised map and also overarching policies within the comprehensive plan that we need to look at probably in the next comprehensive plan update. Next slide. So how are we engaging people? As Allison mentioned, we want to make sure our strategy for engagement and communication remains equitable and inclusive, which means primarily meeting people where they are. So there's a three-layered approach that we're taking, constant, coordinated, and collaborative. The constant part of this is making sure that no matter where people, when and where they enter into the process, there is a set of information that they can get up to speed 24/7, 365. On the coordinated part of the engagement strategy, this is where we're leveraging relationships with the community, with our departmental and regional partners to get the word out and to make sure that we are leveraging and not just showing up and making those connections for people during our engagement strategy. The collaborative part is where we support and empower our leaders within the community and our elected and appointed officials. That's where we make sure that you guys have the information you need to get the word out to your constituents, as well as point them to the process wherever they enter into the planning process, so they make sure they get plugged in. Next slide, please. So some of our resources include definitely our project website. This is where everything will live, and that's on our Charlotte Future website. What's on the landing page is a video we wanted to show you tonight, but we'll make sure you get it in an email that provides a summary of how all these pieces fit together. It's really simple and make sure that everyone knows what the process is and where to go to find the information. There's an interactive map that talks about the process, how to get involved, and frequently asked questions. Next slide, please. Another key component that's really helpful to this process are community reports. We have 14 reports that will be live on our website coming Thursday that talks about who lives, works, and plays in these areas, really getting to know the lay of the land and talking a little bit about the expected growth that's happening in this area. These reports are helping us to refine our engagement strategy. We have our overarching engagement and communication strategy for the entire project, but these reports helps us to create a tailored approach for each geography. Next slide, please. And the other component that's really key to our engagement strategy is the Ambassador Toolkit. This is a carryover from the comp plan and the policy map that really makes it easy for people to get the word out. It's a one-stop shop similar to a press kit that has pre-made messages for social media, emails, just newsletters, any kind of way you need to get the word out. This is the landing page or landing area of our information that helps to get the word out. One new component of this is our youth engagement strategy. We had an intern this summer that helped develop and shape how the younger population wants to be engaged. So we have a youth engagement component to our Ambassador Toolkit that's really helpful. Next slide. So what is expected next is we will have our community kickoff with our spring and fall workshops this year. Each geography, all 14 geographies, will have 3 workshops, one virtual, one in person, and one on a Saturday, to capture and help people to be engaged in the process no matter what their busy schedules are. And those workshops typically offer childcare, language translation for the materials, in-person translation, or any accessibility needs. We try to meet those upon request, and also make sure that these workshops are near transit stops, and we provide shared ride codes like Uber and Lyft for folks to make sure that they are able to get to the meetings as well. But we encourage people to go to our website for additional information. And now I'll turn it over to Laura, and then at the end we'll take questions on both projects.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm going to give you guys a fairly brief update on where we are with the UDO. So, you may not have heard a lot from us on the UDO since August, but there's a lot going on. Next slide. And one of the major initiatives that has been going on is the UDO University, which has been led by our Land Development Division of the Planning Department, and for 10 Fridays from 1 to 2:30 have set up a series of class topics, and they will be continuing these through March 17th. You can see we're halfway through, and the attendance has been really pretty phenomenal. These are all virtual meetings. There are 5 more sessions, and in addition to people being able to attend virtually live, the class topics are also recorded and available after the live sessions. And there has been a lot of folks that have listened afterwards. Typically 100 or more people, even after the sessions, have come back and listened to them. Next slide. Another thing going on, moving us towards implementation of the UDO, is our change in rezoning applications and what we're accepting as far as the zoning districts that are being used. So as of February 1st, we started accepting conditional rezoning petitions to UDO districts, and these are the first development submittals of any sort that are required to use the UDO regulations. They'll include the comprehensive transportation review requirements, and also, as of that date, we are no longer accepting conditional rezoning petitions under the pre-UDO zoning districts or our legacy districts. So it's going to take a while before you see the last of conditional rezonings under our current ordinance, because there is a process, and we actually have a fairly long queue, but we'll come to the point where everything at some point conditionally will be under the UDO and not under our current ordinance. And then starting March 1st, our conventional rezoning petitions will be coming in only under the UDO districts. And anything that is in the queue on the effective date of the UDO will be changed to the UDO district if it is a conventional rezoning. So after June 1st, you will not be seeing conventional rezonings to our current districts. Everything will be coming forward, if it's conventional, to a UDO district. Next slide. We have been working on some text amendments to the UDO, and if we go to the next slide, we'll just remind you, as Allison said, that the UDO has always been meant to be a living document that we will amend regularly as we learn more, as conditions change. We know that in 600-plus pages of regulations, we're not going to get it all exactly right, though we think we've done a really great job so far. But we are finding some things that already we think we should go ahead and take care of, either through cleanup text amendment or a couple of other items that I'll mention in a minute. And we will be filing our initial text amendments later this month, and then anticipate having these to council for decision prior to the effective date of June 1st for the UDO. Next slide. So a little bit more about the text amendments. The cleanup text amendment, again, was anticipated. I think we always knew, and from everything we've heard from any jurisdiction that's done this, that you do amend your ordinance after it's adopted. So it was anticipated through our adoption process. So we're working right now on, as we've learned a little bit more, adding some clarity to the regulations, making some minor adjustments, making minor corrections. For example, we found some references that are the incorrect reference. So it really is a cleanup, and we think a fairly benign, but something that absolutely needs to be done before this goes into effect. And then there are other text amendments that are a little bit more significant, two that we're looking at right now. One for land clearing and inert debris landfills, and a second one for tweaking the uses permitted in the commercial zoning districts, the CG and CR districts. And working on almost have an advisory committee pulling together a group of folks who can give staff feedback before or as we are going through this process on some of these other text amendments that are beyond cleanup, so that we're getting additional input. That doesn't mean that we won't be going out to the community or having virtual opportunities for folks to give impact, but this is kind of an early identification of issues from this group of people. Next slide. So along with the UDO, over time will come zoning map changes. If we go to the next slide, we're really looking at two types of changes. One is the translation of zoning, which is what will happen on June 1st. With the effective date for all conventional zoning will translate to a new UDO zoning district based on council's approval. In August of last year, there's a table in the UDO that indicates your pre-UDO district, what it will translate to. And then we will begin, or are beginning it in this year and through the next few years, alignment rezoning and looking at where should we make changes to the UDO zoning districts that are on the ground based on place type and the comprehensive planning effort. So we're very early in that process and thinking about how that may work, but we'll be working with council and the community over the next 2 years on that. So next slide. Again, a little bit more on the alignment rezoning to put the development standards into place to achieve the vision of the comprehensive plan. will update the zoning map, and we think will benefit the community by removing outdated regulations and, again, providing a stronger link between the regulations and the 2040 plan. Next slide. So what to expect in this year for alignment rezoning is we'll be going out in conjunction with community area planning and giving the community some information on what translation of zoning is versus alignment rezoning, getting folks further up to speed on our zoning regulations, and continuing to coordinate with the community area planning team on how and when policy and zoning should be linked. Next slide. So just a recap of what is going on, and again, want to bring to your attention that one, that June 1st effective date of the UDO, and secondly, those UDO text amendments that we will be bringing to council in the spring for consideration. And we would be glad to answer any questions. We could actually, yeah, thank you.
Okay. I have a whole list, so I will add you to that list. But before we do this, I'd like to say to Allison, I have not gotten my autograph on the article. Allison was featured in the UNC Charlotte alumni book as someone that has really taken her degree and made it into real action, addressing issues around equity and inclusion. It was a very nice article, and I will come for my autograph. Okay? Thank you.
Go Niners.
All right, so far I have the Mayor Pro Tem followed by Ms. Johnson, then Ms. Mayfield and Mr. Driggs. So I will keep watching for hands, all right? Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I think I have one question and a couple comments. So under, this is for Alice, Ms. Craig, under the plan development, the timeline says spring and fall 2023 is phase 2, create great places, and then the next slide, it says under the creating great places, we will confirm or recommend refinements to the place type designation. So is this where the policy map will potentially get updated, or is that going to happen at a later date, like on adoption, like 2025?
So we will be looking at place,
For everybody to be able to follow.
This is in the Planning for the Future presentation. These slides don't have numbers, but it's the process and schedule slide, and then the next one is the key plan components slide.
yeah, so it was always the intent in the area planning process to take a closer look at those place types and the policy map. We knew that we couldn't get, fully at that granular level, and this is really the opportunity to do that. So we are expecting some refinements to that map.
So I guess would some of the issues that we're facing during rezonings and everything like that, will we potentially so I guess, will we potentially see the map changing by fall 2023, the policy map?
Oh, no, it wouldn't change that quickly, because we would need to go through the full area planning process and go through all the geographies.
So are we looking like a winter 2025 time frame for
That's
that,
correct.
the policy map to be updated?
We have considered maybe if we could bring that forward, but I think we need to get into the area planning process before we could commit to that. But we want to make sure that we're engaging throughout the entire community and talking through where we might need to see refinements.
But we might have a tool to help us think about the future translation for 2025, I guess.
And as issues come up in the area planning process, we can consider how we might be able to relook at that. So we'll be back in front of you, but certainly through the rezoning process, we will see some of those.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's something to keep an eye on. And just two quick comments. The slide of what can you expect from a community area plan. I think that's something that that you should look to kind of drill into over and over again, especially for council members, as we're kind of wrestling with this, so we can communicate that in general, but also from decision to decision. And then just a slide where you have all the community areas, the geography is kind of blown out. I think it would be helpful to kind of put what districts are on there, because, yeah, just until we get more comfortable.
Get more comfortable with them.
With it. And I think it will also illustrate that, I think in some of these are multiple districts, so I think that would be helpful.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next recognition is Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My questions sort of piggyback off of Mayor Pro Tem, so I'll start there. With the community reports, I was going to say the same thing. If the map, the whole map, could have the district lines, that would be helpful. But the community reports for residents, if, you know, when you click the icons, if the street names are there, or in alphabetical order, or, you know, the precinct numbers, or something so people can know what district they're in, I think will be very helpful. I also wanted to ask about the cleanup text and just the transitional period. We know we've learned some things since the approval of the UDO, and while we're in transition, we've heard developers and maybe some folks on the dais call this kind of a time of purgatory, right? And we've asked for tools to help make decisions, because even developers have a challenge with that. So I would just continue to ask for tools to help guide us. You know, it may not be consistent with this plan, but it's consistent with the community plan or the upcoming report. It would just be helpful to kind of give us that kind of guidance if there's anything. Also, we talked about some changes being made prior to 2025. If there are any policies that have arisen as a priority or as a big challenge, if there's a way that we could implement some policies, maybe not the entire, you know, plan, but it would be helpful. I'm thinking of the cumulative traffic study. We've talked about that. And also the landfill policy. We know that that's has arisen to be a problem, and we recognize that. So if there's a way that we could pull out different policies and maybe prioritize those, I think that would be helpful.
Sure, if I could just clarify really quick, the couple that Laura mentioned, those text amendments, we are anticipating bringing that before you all before the UDO effective date. So, because I know the landfill in particular has been of interest to many council members as well as commissioners.
Thank you. And then my next question, I know that the city spent a lot of time and energy and creative outreach and planning to get the word out about the UDO and the 2040 plans. However, we still had a very low engagement rate when you compared it to the entire population of the city. I want to know if there are goals for a certain percentage in this section of the plan. Are we going to do anything different? I know we have the Charlotte Speaks newsletter. Hopefully that will increase engagement. But if we have, because I don't remember what the percentage was last time. I don't know if it was less than 5% or less than 2% of the population. I really don't know what the number was, but I remember there being opportunity for improvement. So if there's a goal of what the engagement number will be before we consider it a success, if there's any, I've already noticed, Allison, this seems a lot more clear, I think, and more user-friendly just in looking at it. So I just wonder if the plan will be different, if there's different things that we can do, but I'm looking forward to the next step. I would just like to see the number of folks who are familiar with the process to be increased. And I know that the city staff worked tirelessly. I know you did, but maybe there's and I don't know if it's the seniors or what population, But I know when I was out in the community at larger events, there were people that, weren't familiar with the plans. So I'd just like to know, is there a goal, if there's going to be something differently, done differently, and what we can do to help get the word out?
Sure, we've learned a lot in the last few years about things that worked, new ideas, and so constantly trying to try out new things. We'll certainly be monitoring who we're reaching and who we're not along the process, and when we find that there are gaps, finding different tools to reach those individuals. So I think the toolkits that we have now are a really good way to start hitting people in a lot of different ways, a lot of different geographies, and certainly it will always be reevaluating how we can improve on that.
If I could add to that point about the measuring the success, I think definitely we learned a lot through the comp plan and the policy map, and some of those tactics will carry forward. But I think what we are really focusing on is measuring what success looks like differently. It's not just warm bodies in a room, but how many people are engaged from meeting to meeting. Are they providing meaningful feedback on the topic? Because a lot of times we meet and folks are just all over the place, or really capturing our time with whatever issues they may have, also capturing that, and then looking at working with our departments to leverage their outreach. Housing and Neighborhood Services has jumped in early to say, we're your partners. How about you guys leverage our neighborhood liaisons? We go to the neighborhood meetings. We can push out the information. Working with 311 to have preset messaging. Anyone that calls to that center will hear about our process, will hear about our project. So I think one of the biggest things is leveraging our partners in their engagement efforts, and also changing how we measure success. It's not just warm bodies, it's who's continuing on through the process, who's providing meaningful process, and the diversity of that perspective and viewpoint and feedback is also what we'll be measuring.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Mayfield?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Following up on my colleague, I would also like to encourage you all to utilize us, your council, not just the district rep, but also your handful of at-large members, and sending us information in a format that we can easily share on our social media. There are different members that have a different level of social media interaction where we can get the information out to constituents as well. And it's always helpful to let your district rep know when you are going to be at a neighborhood meeting, versus so that they can help to coordinate that. I remember the days where you have 5+ meetings on the same evening and you running from one to the other, so that will be helpful. I also had questions / recommendation. Since this is a living document and we're looking at the ability to see just in the last few years, so the world changed a lot. We've seen a lot of growth, a lot of development, things that we may have thought would be a good idea. We might see that there are some challenges. One, and these comments are coming from conversations on Nextdoor and in community. So we approved a long time ago, for the sake of density, 5 feet between the homes. That is a challenge. One of the reasons is because what is happening, especially in new build communities, you're having a lot of standing water because sunlight is not able to get in. Now, I'm not saying we need to go back to everyone having an acre-plus lot, but there has to be a balance between somewhere in that 5 and 10 feet, because 5 is causing us challenges down the road, because if that is sitting there, that's causing erosion, that's causing other challenges in that neighborhood. And what we don't want is to fast forward a decade from now and needing government dollars to go back in to try to figure out some irrigation, some type of plumbing. There's some things we could do on the front end. Another thing is, I don't know if this is something that through our policy language, I don't believe that we necessarily need to go get permission through legislative, Dana, but we also need to look at utilizing our CAP and how we do development, how are we doing greener development? Meaning something that seems as simple as wire mesh or rebar when the foundation is first being laid. That also is something that long-term for that home, for the quality of that home, whether it's a townhome, whether it's single family, you're not gonna see the cracks in the driveway. If it is, since we love to build slab on grade, you're not gonna see the foundation cracks that then you turn around and come to local government needing assistance to do some repairs around the homes. Our older homes, which 30s, 40s, 50s, that had wood flooring, that is a very different conversation than what we've been building the last decade plus with these concrete slab, where you literally just have the barrier and concrete poured over it versus rebar and or wire mesh, which has a longer life sustaining ability for that home. These are some things that I would like brand new communities that are being built for rent. How do we create some sustainability for these neighborhoods for them to be successful and also protect ourselves utilizing our language and our expectations and our hopes around environmentally creating something better for our community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Mayor. Two questions. One, what will be the consistency reference as of the effective date? So we have a policy map now. Does that stay in place?
That's correct,
And so is that going to be the thing that, but meanwhile, we will have translated all of the zoning categories, and there will be a lot of presumably inconsistencies between the policy map and the translations. Is that right?
So I think things will look fairly similar to what you're experiencing today, just in terms of the process. But we will be utilizing the newer zoning districts from the UDO when having those conversations, but the consistency process will be similar.
So I guess the concern I have is that we could find ourselves approving rezonings that are not consistent, and that would make it look as if we had just adopted a new policy and we were already making exceptions to the policy. It puts us in a place where it's hard to be certain, like I'm not sure what the reference is. The other question I had was, do we plan to roll out the area plans all at the same time? Are they all going to become effective at the same time?
That's our goal. We want to make sure that we aren't leaving people behind, and so we're going to be engaging in the different areas citywide, and so having staggered workshops throughout the entire city with the idea that they're all adopted at the same time, so we're engaging everyone and people aren't feeling as though they're left out of the process.
Right. I think it's a good idea because otherwise you've got different policies operating in different places. But just for what it's worth, I think that timeline is very ambitious to get all of that done. Thank you.
I thought the same thing, too.
All right. Ms. Molina?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to echo, first of all, go Niners.
Go Niners.
Congratulations. That's pretty awesome. It's pretty dope. But I just want to echo what I've heard resounding among my colleagues. I'm really focused on the area plan. And so just for my reference, I'd like for you to tell me traditionally what does an area plan involve? So when we've actually implemented an area plan in the past, what has that meant? Like, has it been with this circumference? Has it been with this, amount of area included? Or what is the determinant? Is it population?
So the difference between the area planning process from the past and today is really that we have very recent policy with the comprehensive plan, and we've got an adopted policy map. So the actual components of an area plan will look very similar in this path versus in the past. Just the difference is that we've made a lot of progress in talking about citywide and comprehensively what our vision and goals are. We've gone through and we've adopted a policy map, and so a lot of that work would have been done at the area planning during the area planning process, but we did that first and looked at things citywide and then started diving into the details of each area plan. So they're similar, very similar. It's just we've done a lot of the head work citywide before we get into the different areas.
Okay, so building on that, right, because I'm thinking about especially the last time that we done one as opposed to the increased population that we have now, right? So we have increased population, we have increased density, we have this diversity of residents. So I'm thinking, because the first thing I honed in on, of course, is East Charlotte, right? So we have 28 precincts, 28 voting precincts in East Charlotte, and that's what, 5,000 plus people per precinct. I'm thinking about the areas, because again, I'm hand in hand with the people who have elected me to sit here, and I'm thinking about the diversity. The biggest hangup that I hear from, for an example, the Far East Neighborhood Coalition is how far behind they are as opposed to so many of the other areas, right? I get so much frustration and pushback from that particular community because they are, previously unannexed parts of our city that their basic, amenities aren't present, right? And so we're saying 10-minute neighborhood, and the reality, and I wish we could say this to them, is that the reality, it seems, based on our budget and everything that I'm hearing, is their aspirations of the 10-minute neighborhood is not nearly as close as our middle and inner, parts of the eastern part of our city. So can you help me understand? Because if we're going to loop this all together, right, like if we have a group, you're going to have, I'm just speaking for the people that I represent, who I interact with every single day in some way. You're going to have one part of our meeting that's going to be really hyper-focused on the parts of our area that's not developed. And then you're going to have more so, other communities that are going to speak to, need as well. But how do you, and I got to echo my colleague, Mr. Driggs, it's really ambitious. I'm just thinking about East Charlotte. That's hyper ambitious to say that we're going to create a plan for such diversity of need. Can you help me understand where are we going?
Sure, and Alicia, feel free to jump in too. I think it really, as I mentioned, it starts from where we began with having a comprehensive plan in place, a policy map in place. I think early on in the comprehensive planning process, people didn't really understand what we were doing. I think gratefully we have a lot more participation. I think the way that the area plans are organized now are more efficient, so we can have conversations amongst different neighborhoods who may have similar challenges or opportunities and talk about how we might be able to work together. And we'll certainly, as Councilmember Mayfield mentioned, utilize, or I can't remember if it was Councilmember Mayfield or Johnson, utilizing you all to help make sure that people are aware of the process and are participating from the beginning. And so, this really serves as the official kickoff, and we'll start releasing materials this week. And so wanting people to be involved in the very beginning.
I can add to that, Allison. I hate to be the old lady in planning, but I have been there like a long time and seen it change over time. And what I think, what's really different from where we've been to where we've come is we were doing neighborhood by neighborhood and just laser focused on that particular neighborhood and not thinking globally and comprehensively about diversity, growth challenges, expected growth. We were just in that one area. What the comprehensive plan allowed us to do is pull back and say, what is our overarching vision for growth and development in this entire city, kind of 30,000 feet. And then the policy map took those policies that talked about place, the 10-minute neighborhoods, safe and equitable mobility, resilient economy. It took those policies and applied them to the policy map, which is what you guys are using today to help make decisions about growth, development, and investment. And so we've leveled the playing field for the entire community with the adoption of the policy map in terms of how we want to grow. This planning process will take that to another granular level and have conversations with those neighborhoods, as Allison mentioned, that have similarities across the entire community. That's the beauty of doing it all at once. And I know it's ambitious, but we can do it. We've done it twice. We can do it again. But definitely looking at more granularly about infrastructure. What are those key areas that haven't seen investment in a while? How do we approach that in an equitable manner as we invest and make decisions about growth? but it gives us an opportunity doing all 14 at the same time to look at it through that lens, all at once, instead of neighborhood by neighborhood. We missed a lot of opportunities in our old process because there are similar issues on the east side, west side, north side, south side, where we can have a more pragmatic approach to how we solve those issues and problems and make decisions about investments. So that's the biggest thing I'm encouraged about this new process. We will have updates to the policy map end of this year, refinements. As we're engaging people, we're asking them for feedback on those plan components, developing the plan as we go so people are reviewing it. They see where their feedback is going, and so they can help us in 2024. Here's our vision. What are the amenities and programs or capital investments to realize that vision? All under the umbrella of the comprehensive plan. We didn't have the comp plan before, and so we were kind of in a microcosm, just in a very siloed manner, looking at neighborhoods. This process will allow us to look at the entire city and create an equitable approach to developing that vision and how we make decisions on capital investments and improvements.
That was good. Thanks. The only thing that I'll add, and thank you both for your answers. I'm looking forward to seeing the progress. I'm definitely open to being there. I want to be a part of, the conversations in East Charlotte. And so actually the first thing that I did, I can't show you my paper, but I was showing Councilmember Ashmira, I was trying to figure out like which districts were corresponding to the particular areas.
Yeah.
So that would be good for us to know so that we can make sure that we're partnering with you so that we can reach our stakeholders too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, just a note for everybody, and I've had this conversation with staff only a couple days ago when we were with the community together. There's a lot of complexity that's going to come up in that 2 to 4 year period for all of us, and I think a lot of it's the unknown of how the process is going to work. I think the best example of that and the stakes of it is this mad rush. You've seen folks, petitioners, including the city, to get rezonings done before the June 1st deadline. And the statement is real simple: the devil I know versus the devil I don't. And I think that's the problem and the issue that a lot of people face. And again, the proof is in their action in that they've made that jump. So we're going to see an example. I've emailed all of you about the Trianon rezoning that goes to hearing next week. I think we're going to see a great example of that I'm trying to bring it up a level so it's not just one case, but it's an example for all of us for many, many cases we're going to have over the coming years where we're going to have to figure out the difference between, if we've got a translation moment that then is going to go to alignment to something else, and the UDO and the comp plan before it set at a macro vision, this is what the city feels it should be, and a group of neighbors feel it shouldn't be that. How are we going to approach that? How are we going to make a decision? Because it's not clear to me whatsoever, having gone really deep into this. And I really think we need some sort of more detailed framework where the expert staff come to us and say, this is what it should be. And we challenge that on its merits. But coming into it without because at the end of the day, if community members all across this city look at this in the dozens and dozens and dozens of instances that will be out there and say, I just don't like that. And we're sitting here thinking what their likes are versus what a strategy that's been put in place over here and trying to balance that reactively, it is just going to be such a brutal time for us. So I really, again, I won't go into detail of the stuff that will kick off, but I encourage you, if you haven't, to take a look at that communication I sent you, and I think this is a mini pilot to see what that period is going to look like, because at the end of the day, I really do think, there's a lot of small things that are important in small area plans and community area plans, but just in my personal opinion, there are two things that actually really matter. One is, what is the infrastructure analysis that we've all been talking about that goes down into that community level? What are they once they get their hands on it, what are they going to do to champion and push back on us to get infrastructure investments made? That's unclear that we'll do that yet, but I think staff agrees that's important. The other one is real simple. With what a zoning is on a parcel today, tomorrow, and then after alignment, do they agree with that and want it? And are they saying the same thing? So we're going to have to figure out how to parse where they disagree. And I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of disagreements. So I hope that we all just kind of keep that on our radar and really act consistently and proactively so we don't have a nightmare on our hands.
All right, thank you. Ms. Watlington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just got a quick question. I noticed that in these maps, the airport was in West Middle, but then it showed up in West Outer. I just want to verify which one of these community area plans is the airport in.
Oh. Right now, it's probably, will end up, whatever the largest portion, end up in that geography that has the largest portion of the facility. Because there is so massive. The way that the geographies were drawn, and we're using them from the comp plan and the policy map, they follow data reporting and tracking boundaries that are used across the city and the county. And so some parcels will be split, but once we get into the process with those different stakeholders, we can make that determination in discussion with them which one they prefer to be in.
Yeah.
Because they have so much land.
Yeah, because I see the airport, at least on this page,
Right.
is in the same group as folks who live along 77 and Statesville Road versus the people who live next to the airport right at Renaissance West. And so that feels like an adjustment.
Yeah, we're open to that, and the geographies are, the population are equally distributed amongst the geographies as well. And on the virtual map, you can tap on a layer and the council districts will pop up, so you can see how that all marries together as well.
Done. All right, I think that's every speaker that every council member that wanted to speak, and we have no public speakers this afternoon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've got a big job in front of you, but I know you're up for it, so thank you very much. Okay. So the next item on our agenda is the federal and state legislative agendas. I'm going to turn this over to the committee chair.
Yeah, I can certainly introduce him. Thank you, Madam Mayor. So first, I want to recognize the committee members. Mr. Mitchell is our vice chair. Committee members Dante Anderson, Tarek Bukhari, and Luana Mayfield. So we have this federal and state legislative agenda for 2023 in front of us. And the committee approved this agenda on a unanimous vote on February 6th. And you will see in this agenda, we have issues relating to airports, transportation, immigration, digital inclusion, environment, sustainability, and resilience. And on our state legislative agenda, we have issues related to affordable housing, mobility, transportation, aviation, sustainability and resilience, digital inclusion, environment, and public safety. And all the feedback that was provided to the committee was taken into consideration to arrive at this point. So as our this agenda will be presented at our NLC conference that's on from March 26th to 28th as the next step if it's adopted, and the state legislative agenda will be presented at the delegation, and that's date is still being worked on by Dana and his team. So I move to adopt item number 7. I make a motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to adopt the committee's recommendation that's in your agenda package, which is on page 8 and page 9 of item 7. And we have a second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Is there any discussion? Mr. Bukhari?
Yes, I think there's a number of things that are very important in there. I am not going to be able to support this for one primary reason, which is there is a lot at stake for us to make sure that we have the best chance possible to get a transformational transportation investment. And what this reflects right here, from a federal level, citing a 2030 plan that right now is dead on arrival, to a state level that doesn't appropriately incorporate the level of planning and the roads first requirements that we have heard from the General Assembly. We simply can't take this forward. This is the tail that is right now wagging a broader dog that needs to ultimately figure out what it wants to be to have a shot at success. So I'm going to unfortunately not be able to support it. And I would encourage my colleagues, if you are serious about wanting a transformational transportation investment in this community, we cannot continue doing the exact same things that we have been doing. The General Assembly, the community, the voters in a referendum, the towns, all of our partners, it just won't work. And we haven't appropriately crafted the language in order to make that happen, in my opinion.
All right. Mr. Driggs?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I recognize that a lot of things in here are consensus items for all of us, but I will not be able to support the agenda. I think I've already said in the past, as transportation chair, that I think by going in and talking about revenue sources, we will be perceived as already asking for our 1 cent sales tax, and they don't know what we want to do with it. We have not formulated a plan that they can judge, and so my preference would be to continue to work towards establishing a consensus or a clearer statement. I mean, what is the document right now that they could look at in order to assess what this plan, what this 1 cent sales tax would actually pay for? So I think we would be better advised. We saw an alternative version of this, which was just work with them to further the development of our plans and implementation. But specifically talking about revenue at this point, I think is premature and probably counterproductive. So I'm afraid I can't quite get there.
All right. Anyone else? Ms. Ajmera?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to respond to some of the comments that were made. When it comes to mobility and our transportation investments, this has been going on for the last several years. And this is not something new that we have discussed. We all agree that we need to invest in our infrastructure, especially our transportation. We need to address the issues of congestion and traffic. We need to address the issues of sidewalks, especially close to our schools. Our kids are hurting, our community is hurting, and I just feel like this is a step in the right direction if we are truly serious about investing in our infrastructure while we continue to work on the strategy. In fact, we will be working on engagement strategy on how we engage our federal and state legislators in upcoming weeks and months. And that's where the feedback from all of our colleagues, especially our regional partners, will be important. I know Mr. Driggs introduced me to some of our regional partners at our Business Alliance meeting, especially our Huntersville mayor. And I had a conversation with her as to how do we go about collaborating and ensuring that we ask for these regional investments as a team working on this together. So we are taking a very collaborative approach. As you can see, Dana and his team continues to work with our regional partners, and our lobbyist team will continue to do that. This is just the first step in the process that we got to get through in order to tackle the next issue. But you know, the way our city is growing, we just cannot afford to not take even a single step or be afraid to take even a single step forward. So I really hope that council will support this unanimously, because that sends a strong message that we are united in this. We may not agree on how we go about that, about asking, but at least we agree on an idea that we have to invest in our infrastructure. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I think we can all agree that we have a lot of work to do, whether it be around securing revenue to invest in our mobility plan, or then how to sequence that investment. And over time, there'll be a lot of work that needs to happen to adjust as things change. But I will be voting to support this, and while I hope everybody does, it seems to be clear that not everybody will. We will, like I said, we will continue to have different ideas about different approaches. I think that was pretty clear from the retreat that we had a couple of weeks ago. But this is a big step if council adopts this. It does provide a clear message as to where our priorities are. And I would just hope that regardless of how we vote, we understand where the position of the Charlotte City Council is, and the ethical responsibility that we have to work on behalf of the City Council and the people of Charlotte once the City Council makes a decision. We can still have our own opinions about how we go about things, but once the City Council makes a position, it is our ethical duty to the oath that we have to work towards that position, regardless of where our vote on that matter lies. That will be an important distinction to make as we continue the work that needs to be done. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Okay.
Committee members, if they want to chime in, Ms. Mayfield or Ms. Anderson.
Okay. All right, do we have a committee recommendation and a motion to approve the committee has made the recommendation to approve the legislative agenda that's included in the package. No further discussion. All in favor, raise your hands. All opposed? Thank you. The motion carries. Okay, the next item is item number 8, adopt a resolution of intent to consider amending the city charter by ordinance to change the form of government. Again, this is coming out of the Budget Governance and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, so I'll ask Ms. Ajmira to address it, and I believe the city attorney has been the staff resource for this. So you can always pass the ball.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to give an overview of what the committee has done. And then I'll pass on to our attorney for any legal questions on the process. So this, for those of you who's been around, this has been an ongoing topic of discussion for last several years. And this was assigned to the Budget and Governance and Intergovernmental Committee to review in depth just the form of governance. And there were several items that came from the Citizens Advisory Committee that our committee did take a deeper dive, because we have new committee members, Ms. Mayfield, Ms. Anderson, Mr. Mitchell, all 3 new committee members. They wanted to understand the Citizens Advisory Committee's work. So Ms. Amy Peacock, who chaired that committee, did a presentation to the Budget, Governance, and Intergovernmental Committee and provided just an insight into how they arrived at the decision that they did and what was recommended, what was not recommended. Well, our committee decided to take some of their recommendations, but not all. And I think Mr. Mitchell said this really well the other day. Obviously, committee took citizens' input very seriously, but they also had their own way, their own thought process about how do we move forward with this. So the committee specifically made a decision that we are going to recommend 4-year term, and we are also going to recommend adding an 8th district while keeping 4 at-large seats on the council. And all of that will be left up to our residents to decide. So the committee did not make a recommendation saying that we are going to move forward with it. It's going to be left up to the voters to decide as part of the referendum. So I just want to make that very clear. That was the committee's recommendation. And with that, in terms of what are the next steps, what are the legal requirements that we have to follow, this is just the first step that starts the discussion. And hopefully this topic will not be sent back to the committee, because I think this has been going on, like I feel like deja vu for almost 3 years now, because I served on the budget committee during our last council term, and this has been just being deferred each time. So hopefully we can make a decision on this, whether to move forward today or not. But hopefully this won't be kicked back to the committee. And this is our committee's recommendation. So Mr. Baker, if you want to go walk us through the legal process and what does this mean, please feel free to do so.
Certainly, and thank you, Councilmember Ajmira. What you have in front of you is literally the first step of a statutorily guided process of changing the form of government. And the first step is to adopt a resolution of intent to consider, which means that you're not making any final decisions tonight. You're simply putting together what you're considering changing of the city charter, and that relates to the structure of the government. At the same time, again, this is statutorily required that if you're going to adopt the resolution of intent, then you need to set the public hearing for when there's going to be a discussion about the resolution of intent. And the document, we have put together a resolution of intent that mirrors the language that has been recommended by the council committee. As Councilmember Ajmira pointed out, she wrote down, I just want to add one thing, that there is staggered election terms is what has been proposed. And in the resolution of intent, and this is more of a legal conversation that we had between us, because the statute requires to describe briefly but completely whatever changes you're going to make. So it's easy to say from 2 to 4 years. That's pretty simple and straightforward. And those are your only options if you're going to increase your terms. It's easy to say that you're going to add another council member. Very, very simple. The staggering, the question literally was, should we just say we're going to consider staggering the elections, or should we actually put forth what a staggered election looks like? I will tell you that in the conversations, and I've been involved in the Citizens Committee and the Council Subcommittee, we've just talked about staggered, but we haven't talked about how the stagger would actually work. So as my deputy and I were discussing how best to put that out there, whether we needed to just say staggered or spell out the staggered, we kind of split the baby and did both, which is in the resolution of intent, which is in front of you, and we've made some changes to that. Today, we have both the stagger and then we put out, and this hasn't been discussed at the council, a potential way of staggering, which would be your at-large representatives and your district representatives, and the stagger occur between basically somebody, if this all goes through and it all gets voted on, one group in 2025 would be up for a 2-year term, and the other group would be up for a 4-year term. And then whichever one was a 4-year term in 25, they don't go again until 2029, and the 2-year term that's in 2025 is up for a 4-year term in 2027. So by 2029, you have the 4-year term, again, if that all goes through. I just bring that to your attention because we've not discussed how a stagger works, and that doesn't, if you pass this resolution of intent, that doesn't lock you into that particular stagger, but again, just because of the language of the statute, and whether or not briefly but completely means just say stagger or spell it out, we kind of did both. So that's where we are. Also, so that's all in going from 2 years to 4 years for the mayor and council, staggering the election terms, and adding the additional district member to increase the size of the city council from 11 to 12. It's what's in Action A. Action B is that the resolution of intent will be adopted with the condition that adoption of the ordinance will occur through a referendum. And then C is the setting of the public hearing, which is simply statutorily required. You have to do that at this meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I make a motion to approve action A, B, and C.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to adopt A, B, C, and D. Oh, sorry, A, B, and C. And I think that everyone probably has something to say about this. I thought I would start with Ms. Mayfield and go around to the dais this way. And so, Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayfield. Actually, Attorney Baker did clarify it. The language is clarified into what I was going to ask about, so thank you.
Okay. Any comments on the item?
Yes, ma'am. I would, as the chair of our committee mentioned, this is not a new conversation. So when I served on council for my first 8 years, from 2011 to 2019, we were having these conversations. It is up to the current council to make a decision and move forward.
Right.
I am happy that our committee has moved this out of committee to full council. We have decided that what we are supporting is putting it on the ballot, even though by North Carolina statute, we had the ability to add an additional council member and to change our terms without taking it to the ballot and putting it on a referendum. But we decided as a collective body that we want to bring it to the constituency, and now it's our responsibility to explain to residents, of which a lot of them tell us, why are we on 2-year terms? So I want us to keep in mind that this is not a new discussion. Again, this conversation was happening long before I came into office in 2011. We definitely had it throughout 2011. The challenge has always been political will versus political ability. We have the political ability to put this on the ballot, to let our residents of the city of Charlotte take part in voting up or down this conversation. The question is, are we finally at the place where we have the political will? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Mayfield. Yes, I think we are, hope we are. The city is growing. This is a changing city. Everything's changing around us, and I'm honored to be a part of a council that's bold enough to take that necessary step. When you talk about 4-year terms, we've been talking about this issue for years, just since I've been on council. And the last council, we were hoping to get this resolved, but we didn't. So it takes things like Councilmember Graham always says, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So we do need the governance to be able to ensure that we're able to finish these large projects. So I'm looking forward to supporting A, B, and C. And again, I'm honored to be a part of the team that's hoping to move the city forward. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a person who's not a member of the committee and a person who is a new member of council, I can absolutely tell you that I've heard this as a conversation. But I still feel like that this is not comprehensive enough. I feel like that if we have this conversation, we have to add a few things to it. And in my mind, what that means is, having managed campaigns from local to presidential, I feel like the local elections have dismal outcomes. That's the first things first. We vote on odd number years, and our election outcomes are not representative of the districts that we serve. And so I wonder if you are going to give someone even longer in a term where we don't have a full representation of the district, how much are we really serving the constituency? I would have liked to see this be something that we considered on an even number year, somewhere where we can ensure a greater outcome of the residents when they do vote for someone who's going to sit and hold that seat for 4 years. And so, it's not that I'm totally against the idea of, having a 4-year term. I just would have liked to see some additional parameters. I also, in that same sentiment, term limits is not far beyond this discussion because, in a service role, there are many of us that come to this role with a heart for service. And in that, we know that we come, we serve, and we move on. But there are other people who will come and serve and hold the weight of the constituency, and they will never move. And the people who live in that place could be, they could hold the weight of having someone who's not properly serving them and having to wait an even longer time to have a change in leadership. So I think if we hold this conversation, we have to hold it responsibly, and I think we have to add some parameters to this. So I'm still sitting at the dais kind of torn on where I sit, but do I like having to run every other year? Do I think it's effective governance to get here, and by the time you're here and you start, policy moves slow. Ideas are fast and policy crawls. And so something can start in one council and not end for 2 or 3 councils, and that can change multiple hands. I remember our city manager once saying that he'd seen 4 different council members in my seat, in his tenure. That's enormous. That's 4 different sets of ideas and 4 different ways that people would choose to approach an idea from a district perspective, and then having to have an entire governing, system operate based on those ideas. So it could be conducive to have, someone in the seat for longer, because we could actually have a policy that is taken from, implementation to completion with 4 total years. So there's good and bad, in my opinion. And so if we send it to a referendum, I actually wouldn't have agreed with this if it wasn't a referendum, because I feel like that the people we serve would have to decide whether that's something that they would like to see from the people that they've elected to represent them. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Ajmira, you have any?
So I'd just like to respond to Ms. Molina's comments. In terms of additional parameters that will all be discussed later, as Mr. Baker said, this just starts the process. And this just gives citizens an opportunity to weigh in March at our public hearing. This is in no way set in stone. So this just opens up a discussion. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Watlington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the spirit of continuing the conversation, I'm happy to support the conversation. I think that much of what has been said so far around the dais really is about what is it that our public actually wants. And I think that in so much as this gives an opportunity for people to come forward and sign up for the public hearing, send emails, call, let us know what it is that you want to see. The options that are before us are simply the options that are before us. But certainly they are not impervious to input from the people. So I'm happy to have the discussion, and we'll hopefully get some direction from our constituents where we want to go moving forward.
All right. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with some of the comments my colleagues have made. I, too, get lots of questions around why our term limits are just 2 years and our ability to be effective in that 2-year span, and in this case, a 15-month span, when something outstanding impacts the terms. And I have watched over the years you all, council, have this discussion. So I am very happy to be a part of the committee to actually move it out of committee and bring it to a point where we can put it in front of the public. I believe that the public input is critical here, and as we are on the precipice of incredible growth and will only continue to do so, I think this is a strategic question and decision that we need to make for our city with the input of the public. So I'm, of course, I'm going to support it, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Bakari?
Thank you. Just a couple points. One, and I know we all have different conversations with different groups of people in the city. I have never once had a conversation with anyone that wasn't already in office or wanting to run for office at some point where they told me, I really care about you guys having 4-year terms. Never once has that come up. No one has ever said, you know what, Tark, the thing I want is less touch points to be able to hold you accountable. Never have heard that one time, unless it was someone who was serving on this body or had one day hopes of serving on it. And to be honest, if you logically think about it, being closer to the voters, them having that accountability over us is a really important thing. We all know this, whoever's willing to say it out loud, we don't take super controversial votes right before an election or in an election year. And that's because people are held more accountable the closer they are to an election where their constituents get to voice their opinions. So while I think it's very important that we do that, I had said early on that I was willing to negotiate with colleagues who were interested if we were, in conjunction with this, going to go to the General Assembly and we're going to request term limits at the same time, because I felt maybe those two kind of counterbalanced each other, but that wasn't done. So that's on the 4-year terms. On the staggered terms, we have to think about the implications of what we're doing and what that's going to have on future councils. And I don't know how many of you have really thought this through, but if you have a staggered term that starts in 2025, and let's say from that point forward, you've got all the district reps 2 years, then you've got the mayor and at-large 2 years later, think about what implications that has if every 4 years, all the district reps get a free look. We all know what that means. They can hold their district seat and they can run at large or for mayor, and if they lose, they don't have to leave the seat. Imagine the dynamic that creates around this dais for people who literally, with that free look, run for those seats. So it's not like, oh, we're not in a political season. We're in a more complicated political season. And I will 100% guarantee you that that free look is a thing that will absolutely happen from district to at-large and mayoral races. So that's why the staggered terms has other implications we have to think about. On the 8th district, this is the most important one of them all. And the committee took something that this ad hoc community committee that had brought forth, and they tweaked it for their own needs against what that committee recommended. And this is the worst one of them all. That committee recommended to all of us that we should add an 8th district, potentially, and remove an at-large council member to stay at 11, an odd number, but more importantly, there are 20% Republicans in this city, 40% Democrats, and 40% unaffiliated. And right now, we are gerrymandered into a spot where we can't come close to having the number of seats guaranteed that represent safe Republicans that match the demographics of the city, and allow the independent seats for toss-ups. It just can't happen. It could happen with an 8th district seat, if drawn properly, if an at-large was removed. So the whole premise of that recommendation was about us better reflecting our community. The same things that many of you feel and say around the General Assembly, right? That applies here to Republicans in the exact same way. So to take an 8th seat in this recommendation and keep the at-large seat, aside from it being an even number, which we've already seen one tie break tonight that has to happen. Imagine that continuing to be a thing. But even putting that aside, it's a chance to further dilute and get away from having a more balanced representation of what this community's voting and party affiliations are. And that's a really, really, really big deal. We can't overlook it. Which brings me to my final point is, so the strategy here, after our last conversation, is to put this, let me get this right, on the same ballot that you are hoping to get the General Assembly, despite those things I just said there, to allow you to put the 1 cent sales tax referendum on as well. If you just think about the political ramifications of that, every single item I just said, for the most part, is not going to be taken very kindly by the General Assembly. In fact, I know that with 100% certainty. So the thought of even floating this conversation right now, let alone doing it, while with one hand and then the other hand going and asking for a 1 cent sales tax referendum, is politically tone deaf at absolute best. So I hope we'll really weigh those out. I hope we'll vote this down right now, once and for all, and move on past this topic that we've wasted so much time on.
Mr. Driggs?
So I agree with a lot of that. I think if the North Carolina legislature and the United States House of Representatives can function on 2-year terms, it's not clear to me why we can't. I think also the idea that we are closer to being assessed by the public is important. I will note also that the re-election rate among people who are doing their job on this council is very high. It is rare for an incumbent to get voted out of office. So I don't see why we shouldn't continue to offer that opportunity to our constituents. And I will mention also that often in the council races, people go to the polls because the mayor is being elected. They know about the mayor race. In many cases, they're not well informed about the council member. So the idea that they have an opportunity to take another look once they've seen their candidate in office for 2 years strikes me as not a bad thing. I do also heartily agree with the suggestion the Citizens Advisory Group did not recommend 8+4. And to say that somehow we have cover from them because we're talking about 8, but we're not talking about 4, no, it has nothing to do with that. I am pleased that we are going to go to the referendum and that we will let the people decide. One issue about the stagger is that it also dilutes the votes. Like, how many people are going to show up based on turnout as it stands right now when all of us are running every 2 years? And now you've got just the district people running. So the voters in each district go to the polls, and what do they see? They see a district race. How many people will show up for that? And to your point, Ms. Molina, how indicative is an election like that? So I have concerns about it. I think, if we're going to send it to a referendum, you could argue, well, let the voters decide, let the public decide. But for my part, I don't want to vote for this and send a message to the public that I'm in support of this. So I need to make it clear now that I don't support it by not voting for this. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilman Ashmere, I want to thank you and your committee for the work that you've done over the last year on this particular topic. And as I read the adopt a resolution to consider amending the city charter to change the form of government, I wish I was that the action items were different. I wish we were talking about a region who had the fortitude to consolidate with our county, that all our small towns were on board with it, that we understood the significance of regional cooperation, regional participation, regional collaboration, and having one voice as a region as we approach Raleigh for all the critical items that we need for our region, enhancing our transportation network and mobility, providing economic opportunities for corporate relocations within the region, strengthening our international airport, all those other things that we can do if we had a regional vision, a regional focus. So I can get really excited if that was the action items. Obviously, it's not. Obviously, that's not going to happen, at least in my lifetime in this community. But I think it's a reasonable step to at least consider or daydream about. I think it gets us where we want to go as a big city. I'm torn. The city just went through a redistricting process where we moved hundreds of precincts from 3 to 2, from 2 to 4, from 4 to 5 and 6, etc. relocating voters to different city council districts, changing their voting precincts, causing some confusion, not a whole lot, but still some political disruption along the way. And to go down this road again, if this was to be voted on by the public and approved, and I don't think that's going to happen because someone has to be out here championing this. We just can't put it on the ballot and tell people to vote up and down if it is the desire of the council for this to be successful. Well, someone has to be out there in the community doing the work, whether it's the alliance or the corporate community. Someone other than the council would have to communicate to the community in a very concise way why this is important. I'm not sure that's going to happen. And therefore, I think the issue of increasing the office of the mayor and city council from 2 to 4 and staggering the election just dies on the vine. I think it just withers away. In terms of adding another district member, this is a partisan board, right? So I'll just leave it at that, right? And then I guess, and Mr. Bukhari says something that I tend to agree with, is what type of conversation do we want to have our community having in November? Do we want to be talking about 4-year terms and staggered elections and many other issues? Or do we want to really focus the conversation on issues that is really important for our community and have the community talking about that and debating that and discussing our regional future and the importance of some of these topics? So I'm not there, notwithstanding the work that the committee's done. I appreciate the work, but for those and other reasons, I'm just not there. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a great conversation to be having. I think it's an important conversation to be having. When it comes to 4-year terms, look, we're a growing city. We're the 15th largest city in the country. We have more and more complex issues and complex policy work to do. Part of the reason why things do take so long is because of our governance structure. When you're trying to figure out a mobility plan or a comprehensive plan or building infrastructure or affordable housing, these are things, this is work that continues to get interrupted and as months and years. This structure, 4-year term with a stagger, allows for continuity to happen. And let's be real with each other, please, and give good information out here. This is not something strange in North Carolina. Hundreds of other local governments, much smaller than Charlotte, have 4-year terms. I believe some in this county have them. So this is something that is tried and true. I would ask, why Charlotte hasn't done it to this point in time. The staggered term still does give voters a chance to check and balance their city council if they are unhappy with the job that they are doing. They can make a material change to the way this board is structured and give commentary to those policy processes that are happening and are ongoing now. I would also kind of point out it's not true that folks don't make difficult policy choices in election years. We did just that last term, where we continued to work up and through the election, working on and taking votes on controversial and hard topics. Having 12 council members, that is the maximum allowed by North Carolina state law. Again, for the largest city in the state and the 15th largest, it would seem to me that it would make sense to have the maximum amount of representation, the maximum amount of democracy, being able to represent the people in this city. It would seem to me that's what the law was made for. Mr. Bakari mentioned something that kind of very contradictory statement, that somehow having 12 council members would be unbalanced, but that we would have more tie votes that would have to be broken. How much more balance could you get than a tie vote that has to be broken by the mayor? It shows that in this city, regardless of political persuasion, there is a diversity of thought and a diversity of policy considerations, regardless of your political persuasion. So I think that is the most important when you are, again, working with a representative body, that you are able to represent those various positions in the community, and not necessarily always thinking about what is the proper party makeup. I think in municipal government, rarely does the state or national political platform come in. Nina's comments, even years could certainly be on the table, and you count me in as somebody who would support that. That conversation is not prohibited by an affirmative vote to this process. And even to, Mr. Graham, I agree that we should consider a more consolidated form of regional government. And that's something that I hope that we can have. Again, that is not precluded by an affirmative vote. And in fact, I think that bringing this to the forefront illuminates the ability for us to change our governance structure. I don't think everybody knows that we have the ability to do that. But those that do, whether they be in the business, whether they be in other parts of government, whether they be people who work closely with us from the community, I've heard plenty of folks that get worn out by 2-year terms. Also, if that term limits would need to be a statewide conversation. So that is not something that we could just do on our own. So I think this is good. I look forward to the conversation, and I am much more optimistic about the engagement and involvement around this than Mr. Graham is for the general public. I think we should give our folks a little more credit. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Mayfield has asked to speak again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, point of clarification for my colleague, Mr. Bakari, because it felt, honestly, a bit disingenuous, because you've been on this council since 2017. So if this was really an issue of concern, we were on the council together where we attempted to bring this forward. It's finally getting out of committee for us to finally move forward with it. But we've set up and debated and discussed, so you've had the opportunity to add your language and to support something moving forward. Fortunately or unfortunately, the interaction that you have might not have created an opportunity for the community to ask you about the 2-year terms. I'm not going to speak for any of my colleagues, but I've had plenty of conversations that were unsolicited of individuals who have recently moved here or been here 5 years or less that have questioned, hey, why are y'all on 2-year terms? What's that about? You know what? We're actually having a conversation about it. Please be engaged and stay in tune. Also, let's keep in mind so that we don't give the public misinformation or give them partial information. The Citizens Advisory Group made a recommendation. That's it. That recommendation was done with previous council. Had previous council done this job and moved forward, this council wouldn't be the one having this conversation. But since this council and this new committee that consisted of new members coming onto the committee received information which was a recommendation, we said, okay, we're going to take this recommendation, but this part we don't agree with, this part we don't agree with. Here's what we're supporting. Do we have support to move it forward? So if there was consensus prior to 2022, then that council should have moved this conversation forward. You chose not to. So let's not give a false narrative regarding, well, the Citizens Advisory Committee group, this is what they said and you're changing it. No, they made a recommendation. A recommendation is just that. I would take it under consideration, but that doesn't mean I'm going to rubber stamp what you provided. Also, again, let's not be disingenuous. We have Mecklenburg County Board of Commissioners, we have school board, we have an election every year. Us going to staggered terms doesn't mean that city council is going to be the only one that's on the ballot, just like we're not the only one on the ballot this year. There is a possibility when we're throwing out what ifs that we might have an even greater turnout with having it on 4-year staggered terms, depending on who we're lining up with, whether that's county commission, school board, or who's the other one in now, I forget. So between the multiple bodies that we have, there's a greater possibility that we will have even greater turnout from the community. If this proposal is supported by the voters, we can see a difference. The biggest piece is we need to get it out of discussion playing ping pong. And a number of us, even though I'm just coming back, I still gave 8 years the first time around. We had this discussion. We had it. A number of members around this dais sat along with me and chose not to move forward. So do not be disingenuous tonight and act like this is something brand new or you have concerns, because you could have moved it forward and then we wouldn't have even had to have the conversation. Y'all could have put it on, said this last year when we had a September election, and it could be done with, but you chose not to. So let's not give partial information to the community, along with the fact that let's recognize the community has the ability to receive information on more than one subject. It is very disrespectful to say, well, I don't know if we want to throw this on the ballot when we're trying to push issues around transportation and other things. Charlotte City Council should not be trying to make all of our decisions and our votes based on what they may or may not do in Raleigh. The representatives in Raleigh are elected just like we are. Our responsibility should be to our constituency that votes for us. Now, whether you're Republican, unaffiliated, Democrat, when I was the district representative, I represented everyone, including those who were in unincorporated area. So if you're going to sit up here and again play this game of words to make it seem like, well, if we don't go to Raleigh, or only way I would support is if we go to Raleigh and ask them to let me kiss the golden ring so that they'll give us permission, that is a challenge because the people in Raleigh are not the ones that voted for you. And thus, all of us around this dais are also voters. So again, please do not give partial information, do not be disingenuous, and do not disrespect the public and say, well, we don't want to override the ability or capability of our voters by putting too much on them for them to have to make all these different decisions. A number of you sat around this dais and could have made this decision long before today, and you chose not to. So now it is just, even though we probably have the votes, once the hands go up, but what I was not going to do is sit here and let you give misinformation, partial information, and in some cases blatantly lie, because if you leave that lie out there, it can become the truth. So that is not what we're doing tonight. And the minutes that anyone can pull up through the clerk's office can easily say every time we've had this discussion who spoke up for it, who spoke against it, or who stayed silent.
I'll be brief, thank you.
in the spirit of not giving partial information, let me then fill in the blanks of what you missed there from a historical perspective. This council started in 2017, as you rightly noted, with a desire by a group that did not have 6 votes, but wanted raises, they wanted term length extensions and staggered terms, and they wanted full-time council, whatever that means, and it was never defined. There wasn't consensus around the group to be able to make it happen. The mayor said, okay, well, some of you are passionately keep bringing this up, so I don't know what to do other than let's bring forth a community-appointed group that is going to bring us recommendations since we can't get there ourselves, and those recommendations are what we will essentially go and try to follow in the last round. Those came back, and it said some things that were liked, and they were cherry-picked out, like we need a raise. They said some things that weren't liked, like nonpartisan elections, where people freaked out. And they said some things, as we see in history, where were kind of liked, where I'll take an extra seat, but I don't want to give up the at-large seat. The point of this wasn't taken up by the council, you're exactly right, it wasn't. Part of it, I guess, goes back to your statement of political will versus ability, but the other part is COVID, and we had a lot of other things to deal with during that time. So now it's back. I have consistently always opposed it because it doesn't make any sense. And now we're at a point where those who wanted it have more votes. It looks like it's going to pass. And all I say is be careful because you're going to get what you wish for potentially. And regardless of the fact that if you consistently hear every single day, voters are like, why don't you have 4 years? I haven't. I can't imagine that occurs. But guess what? We'll figure that out in November, and I think you'll be surprised by the actual answer. But the sad part of this is the thing that actually matters, to Mr. Graham's point, transportation, the investments, the conversations we're really going to have, they're going to be dominated by this topic. And that is where you're essentially not saying this is important. You have to choose what matters to you because it is my strong belief that you can only pick one thing to dominate an election cycle conversation. And that's what you're about to do here. So again, I think we'll see what happens. Call the question. There you go.
Call the question.
Well said.
Call the question.
Okay, I've had this conversation with the attorney about calling the question, so, it's just one of those things that everybody that's tired of talking about it is ready to do, stop. So I do think that if there's no one else that would like to speak, Ms. Ajmira, and then you'll wrap this up for us and we'll have a vote.
I had one more. We were redistricting last year.
I'm sorry, Mr. Driggs. I've recognized Ms. Ajmira, and then I'll come back to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think regardless of what happens today, whether we move forward with the next step or not, as a council, we have to make a decision today whether to kill this topic, and if we want to move forward, that means we are going to go to the next step. So there is no kicking the can down the road because to many members' point, I think the more we defer it, the more time it takes away from other important conversations, whether it's transportation, whether it's budget or governance. So it's disingenuous to say that let's talk about other issues. Well, guess what? A lot of our time is spent on this topic because you decided not to move forward. So whatever it is today, we have to decide whether we are going to move forward or not. Council, again, is not making a decision on whether we approve 4-year term or add an 8th district. All we are saying is let the residents decide and move on to the next step. So I just want to make that very clear because when members said that, oh, we should be discussing about transportation or other things, well, you are the ones who is delaying the progress because you're not moving this forward. You're keeping it in the committee. And our committee is tired of having this conversation. At least I am, because we've been having this conversation for 6 years.
All right, Mr. Driggs And
I'd just like to note, I don't see the point of criticizing the previous council, but I will note that there was redistricting going on. We had uncertainty about our election timetable, and it seemed like a bad time to tackle this. You can't tackle it other than at a certain time to achieve the timeline in advance of Election Day that's necessary for the referendum. So it was discussed. I talked about it. I was the chair of the committee then, and for very good reasons, we didn't try to get it done during that period of disruption with redistricting.
All right. I think that everyone has had an opportunity. The motion on the floor is to approve item 8, action A, B, and C, adopting a resolution of intent to consider amending the ordinance to change the form of government, increasing the terms, staggering the elections, and adding an additional district member, and adopt a resolution of intent that any adoption of an ordinance amending the city charter, I think it's charter, not character, or character maybe, be effective only upon approval by a vote of the people, and to set a public hearing for this on March the 13th. All right. With no further discussion, all in favor of that motion, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Motion passed.
You'll need to do the opposed.
I'm sorry,
Do
Mr.
the opposed as well.
Oh, we did, yes, we need to do the opposed. All opposed to this motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. That's not a very good mandate to go to the public. I just, you have to acknowledge that. It is the reality. I understand that. And I understand the diversity of this group, but I think it will also reflect the diversity of this community on this topic. All right, so the next item on our agenda is item number 9 for CATS bus service agreement with the City of Concord to adopt a resolution approving an interlocal agreement between the City of Concord and the City of Charlotte for bus service operated by the Concord-Kannapolis Transit System, authorize the manager to negotiate and execute agreements and agree to renew the agreements for up to 5 one-year terms, and authorize the manager to amend the interlocal agreement consistent for this purpose, with which the agreement was approved. Do I have a motion on the floor? Moved. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. We have a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Ajmira?
Well, speaking of transportation and regional approach, I think this is a great example of collaboration or continued collaboration. We need more of this with our regional partners on our mobility, because mobility is a thread that connects us all. So hopefully we'll have more of this conversation now that we have numbers 8 out of our way. All right. Item number 8 out.
Thank you. All right, with that, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Anyone opposed? It's unanimous. All right, so that is the last item on our agenda. And so we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move, all in favor?
You did Allison. Allison was the manager.
It's before 9 o'clock.
All right, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Oh, wait. I have to say, yes. I want to acknowledge Councilmember Ajmira is beginning her maternity leave immediately following this meeting.
Yeah.
We wish you and the family a wonderful time with this new baby. You're her big sister, and her dad must be very proud of both mom and the new baby, and we look forward to hearing the happy news. Congratulations, and we will see you when we see you.
Mayor, I had a question regarding the 30-day memo.
Good luck.